Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and have you ever wanted to be ridiculed, publicly shamed, and beaten mercilessly? Well then, what the fuck is wrong with you? Anyway, we're looking at the Figma Darkness today. Darkness. That's a pretty shit name. But impressively, her actual name is somehow worse. Dustiness Ford Lalatina. I don't know how they made a name worse than Darkness, but they fucking did it. Anyway, now I can finally talk about my favorite isekai, Dunbine. Okay, we're not talking about Dunbine. Konosuba is, it's like a D&D session, except for all the players or player characters are mentally retarded. It's about as entertaining as it sounds, which if you are watching this video, then it probably sounds pretty damn entertaining. Oh, box look like box. Wow. As a parody, the design is intentionally generic. Konosuba was originally animated by Studio Dean. They're rather infamous for shitty animation. The original artwork for the light novels is, well illustrated, but do feel like a rather generic light novel affair. Also, while looking through these, I found that apparently Aqua wears stripes. To say I'm disappointed would be an understatement. To be clear here, the word I'm disappointed in isn't stripes, it's wears. Anyway, I would say that the anime designs actually elevate the feel of the show, and I doubt that the series would be anywhere as popular as it is without it. Of course, this isn't based on the anime. Obviously, as you can probably very easily tell, this is based on the movie. Either way, I think that Figma did decent on this. Like the other Konosuba Figmas, this has significantly less issues. None of this bullshit. Some problems, which are not very big problems, would be the paint isn't super clean, and I don't really understand this clear part here. I also do think this suffers from Figma face a bit, but not enough for it to be an issue. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10 for looks because why the hell not? Articulation is standard Figma stuff. Cue the music. Debang, remove, tab, rebang. There be all them face you get. As I said, I do think this suffers from Figma face a bit. If you don't know what I'm talking about, some Figma faces look strangely generic for reasons. I could theorize, but I'm not quite sure why. Also, there's a Good Smell online shop exclusive faceplate, but it doesn't look stupid, so I don't want it. Apparently just taping these parts to the back is just a thing now. I can't really say I feel too negatively about that, but I do find it a bit off-putting. Just tab them in. Very standard, nothing worth mentioning. A pretty standard arming sword. The blade is missing a fuller to reduce the weight, but this doesn't need to be realistic, so shut the fuck up. Remove the pommel, and slide it into the weapon-holding hands. Because the sword can't fit into the scabbard, you got one of these. With how small the figure is, I can forgive it. It's better than either a strangely thick scabbard or a brittle one. This is actually something that I was expecting to be really annoying with the track record for Konosuba Figmas, but it's surprisingly very straightforward and easy to replace these torso and the arms. Future Gokin here. If you are one of those people that are wondering why there wasn't any moaning in the parts where I take her apart, it's because, well, I understand that she's a masochist, but I don't really know if she'd enjoy that. I know that might also be a bit uncomfortable for some people to watch as well. Well, the biggest part of it is that, while it isn't beyond me to do that, I just don't think it's funny. Oh! It's a hero! Is that a fucking Gundam reference? There. I did it. You happy I validated you? You might not be because I intentionally said hero instead of haro to annoy, people. Anyway, you can tab this into this, which attaches to that. Did I mention this is based on the movie? The famous movie scene with the flying cabbage things. I'm sorry, that's a spoiler, isn't it? Please have it in your heart to forgive such a slight on my part, since that definitely happened in the movie. Of course it did, because if it didn't, it wouldn't be in this movie-inspired figure, right? The fact that this is based on the movie isn't some kind of contrived, arbitrary marketing thing, right? I don't know why this bothers me. Figma stand. the dream of every sub-girl, Mazinger. I don't have all the Konosuba Figmas, but I do have Aqua and Kazuma. Overall, it's probably the best of the Konosuba Figmas I've gotten, so if you want something like this, and don't mind the price of more recent Figmas, I can definitely recommend it. Otherwise, no. So this channel is called Zerogokin, and yet I haven't reviewed a Gokin. I'm also wearing a JoJo mask, yet I haven't reviewed anything JoJo related either. In case you got a minor stroke in the last few seconds, we're looking at a Gokin today. The DH Gokin Kotetsu Jig. Kotetsu Jig is about a guy who fucking dies and is turned into a head. I only saw Kotetshin Jig. I watched it in a hospital after getting butt surgery. That anime had a fucking awesome opening song that is probably my favorite Jam Project song, which is saying a lot. But that's it. I'll be honest, I don't really care much for the Jig material I've read and watched. I believe the manga is for children, and I didn't really care for it. The company that made this, Alpha Max, gave what I assume is their first go at a Gokin, and the results here are rather middling. Considering that the company has never made a Gokin like this before, and for the most part makes titty figs, this is understandable. However, while that does explain it, it doesn't excuse it. And if you're wondering if I have any of those titty figs, I would like it if you didn't put them on the same level as the rest of you weeaboo degenerates. Of course I do.
That's a penis!
Also, yes, this is where that piece came from. Stop asking. That's a box. It looks really nice. This is stupid. Probably your first impressions of this are, what the fuck are those colors? Well, my boy, that is Jig. I understand that is a bit weird, but I don't mind it. I quite like the vibrant colors here, although I'm not a big fan of this blue. It looks a bit cheap to me. Design-wise, Kotetsu Jig is probably one of my least favorite Go-Nagai robots, but I still do like it. And this is much like a Future X Gokin Jig, which Future X Gokin is a line that does very nice redesigns of classic mechas, and I quite obviously really enjoy it. But unlike the actual unreleased Future X Gokin Jig, this doesn't look like complete shite. I might change my mind once there are clearer images, but I'm more than content with this being my Future X Gokin Jig, because I think that this looks fantastic. And while I'm more partial to this design than the Future, I don't really like how the legs look. But much like my opinion of a Stoffel, as long as the upper half looks good, I don't really care what they have at the bottom. Well, that's actually completely untrue. I wouldn't care about this character if they had a vagina. And I just invalidated the point I was trying to make. Which is fine, because the DH Gokin Panzeroid is a thing. Now my biggest problem with how this looks is gone. Oh, right. If for some reason you think that the arbitrary scores I give have any weight, they don't. 8 out of 10 for looks. Also, speaking of weight, the figure does have die cast, but is rather light. As you saw, aside from the strangely missing horizontal action on the waist, the range of articulation is actually quite decent. But as your bleeding ears can probably tell, the joints don't really feel very nice, which is rather unfortunate. Future Gokin here. If you look in the manual, apparently these parts are on ball joints. They're just very tight. That also looks like it might break, so yeah, I'm not doing that. You don't get a lot, but you do get some large redesigned Jig armaments. All these look fucking cool, and none of them look fucking stupid. As much as I like having complete sets, thank you, Alpha Max, for not including these, because I don't need this to be any more expensive. See these? They're all rather sharp, and this feels really weird to say considering what the last review was, but I'm actually starting to enjoy the pain. It's a good pain, as the fingers are articulated. The figure doesn't need optional hands, but it does come with these knuckle bomber hands, which to attach you just remove. You know what? The figure costs $300, and from this video I'm probably gonna make $3. So there's how it's supposed to work, but the figure does this fine on its own, and as you've seen, the figure has some very tight ball joints. Attach this, and these. To attach to the arm, remove tab. The mock drills are about as long as Jeeg here is tall, and these look sick. The effects also look very nice, and you can take them off. Allegedly. Attach these, and one of these. Attaching to the arm works the same. Very nice. This is something I don't think that the original Jeeg has, unless I'm wrong about that, but who cares, it looks cool as fuck. Take these off. Works the same as attaching to the arm. Tab into hole. It's a bit too heavy for the boy, so you're going to need the stand. This is a very cool stand that is very modular. I personally like having it like this. Also, this stand is only included in the first release. The second release does get it. It's just this ugly gray. As you probably saw, the figure can be disassembled. This is not a bug, it's a feature. It's not just a feature, but it's also a characteristic of Kotetsu Jeeg. A lot of super robots have gimmicks. And the gimmick of Kotetsu Jeeg is that it is formed by combining parts that are launched out of the big shooter with Cyborg Boy Shiba Hiroshi transforming into the head. This is known as build up. The implementation here isn't very creative. A lot of Jeeg figures tend to use magnets. However, it is a gimmick that I don't really care very much for, so I'm glad they didn't go the magnet route here. The mock drills here not only have LEDs for the rocket effects, but are also motorized. I was dead sure at least one of these didn't work, because I heard that this one had some quality control problems. I think I'm lucky for once and got a good one. Oh, by the way, this uses the usual LR44s. As for the rest of these, you might have guessed they also use LR44s, which would be convenient, makes sense, and also is not how this works. So make sure you're armed, because you're gonna need to go into some dark fucking alleyway to find some obscure-ass batteries. That's amazing. To put in the batteries, take this off, raise this, there you go. A lot of you probably thought that these red parts were the eyes. Well, guess what? You're wrong, you stupid piece of shit. Okay, no. The LEDs look alright. That being said, I don't particularly care for LEDs or gimmicks on figures in general, but as LEDs don't tend to detract from the figure visually, I don't mind them. However, using LEDs for the eyes tends to remove the color, and I really don't like that. I forgot to get 2 of these, and I'm not going back to that dark fucking alleyway. So this is alright, we're moving on. Aqua, Mazinger, Mazinger, Mazinger. Overall, as much as I think this looks really cool, for the price of a fisting
is $300.
This should be a lot better. However, if you like how this looks, don't want to do much posing, and also don't mind the price, you can find either one secondhand, or I believe they still have the second round of pre-orders up for this. It's even cheaper than what I paid for it. What the fuck?
Alright, you can go now.
I don't know what the fuck you were expecting. This is just a head in a jar. Hello, hey, and dear gamers. This is Zerogokin Reviews, and I would like to reassure you to my commitment to quality. So no more silly jokes or edits. This will be a serious review channel from now on. So today we'll be looking at the McFarlane Toys Aridin Break Glass. Aridin is from the Witcher series, and this design specifically is from The Witcher 3, which is a game that I only just played last year. That's right, Dad, I'm a real gamer now. I didn't love it, but I did quite like it, especially the Blood and Wine expansion. Fine, I'll talk about Cyberpunk. Imagine fucking over your company and your workforce because you saw people really liking a game that your company made as a good reason to be incompetent. So your company didn't make The Witcher 3, your employees did, so show them some fucking respect. Anyway, speaking of PR disasters, wow, the Wild Hunt, they're so cool and mysterious. I'm looking forward to finding out what they are. Oh, they're elves. Fuck elves. I mean that figuratively because I have been conditioned to be elf racist by the media I consume. If Vermintide was about slaughtering elves, I'd be a very happy man. But I guess slaughtering furries is the next best thing. Also, you know, it's called Vermintide. So being about slaughtering elves wouldn't really make any fucking sense. Although it would undoubtedly be an improvement. However, I also mean fuck elves. Literally. Because I'm subscribed to the idea that elves are only good for looting. Thank you, hentai. It's a good thing that elves aren't real so I can say shit like this. Honestly, if they were real, I'd probably have more empathy towards them. Anyway, sculpt work here is actually really good and has a lot of little details. Paintwork is, well, considering this is a $20 figure, I guess it's acceptable. I do quite like Eridan's design, but surprisingly, despite how my favorite designs tend to involve muscles and skulls, somehow I like the designs of Immelrith and Cranberry more than Eridan's. It's probably because he's the least chunky of the three. However, I'm not really sure what's going on here, but this looks a bit more like shiny brown than silver. Well, I was going to say that, but in the game it actually isn't just silver, so it looks like this is game accurate, and it's the other figures that are wrong. I do still prefer the entirely silver look though, and I still think this looks a bit too brown. Articulation is fairly limited, which I presume is pretty standard for McFarlane figures, and I don't have much else to say. You've probably noticed by now that he's holding liqueur, because here's the thing. These McFarlane figures tend to not come with any hand options, which for the ones I already had I didn't really find to be an issue, but because they want to make him able to hold his sword in either hand, you're left leaving him with one of his hands just holding air, and it really fucking bothers me. So I'm just gonna have him hold this because fuck it. Also, being a video game villain must be pretty terrible, so I think it's fitting. I'm not gonna show you how to put the sword in his hand because I barely got it in myself, but something I remember from playing the game is how the end of the main game is honestly a bit disappointing. But playing the entire game with a main antagonist who's wearing really sick armor that I knew I wouldn't get, and considering all the Wild Hunt swords you can loot, I was really looking forward to at least getting his fucking sword, and you probably know how that went. So Witcher 3, a terrible game, 0 out of 10. This sword is cool, by the way. You tab it in, and I guess it works. Also, yes, this isn't the stand for this figure, because packaging like this is sacrilege. Fuck you, Todd. Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Lagann, Skull Knight. Overall, at $20, this is a pretty easy recommend. If that sounds unreasonable to you, maybe look at the prices of the other stuff I've reviewed on this channel to see where I'm coming from here. This was $20, by the way. So fuck elves, and that's about it. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at, Oh hey there, Donovan. It looks like I'm gonna be giving you a bit of a workout today. You down for that? Alright. Today we'll be looking at the Second X Hentai Action Erika Kuramoto. As the name would imply, Hentai Action is a figure line about making articulated hentai figures. So someone is probably gonna ask me about this. Let me just say, as much as I kinda like Taimanin, and as much as I think it'd be really funny to talk about this, especially with that little expansion pack they made, but, what the actual fuck? Anyway, the artist behind the original illustration this is based on is Raita, who is probably best known for their design work in Valkyria Chronicles as well as FGO. But if you're well acquainted with your hentai, what you will know Raita for is the hentai series Zettai Jinpaku Mahou Shoujo, which is where this character is from. Erika is probably my favorite of the characters in Zettai Jinpaku Mahou Shoujo. Not because she's an interesting and compelling character, but because she's an interesting and compelling character. The fucking plot is exactly that. It's fucking. If you're the kind of person who feels like they need to complain about hentai plots, go and find yourself a manhole. Since I won't give a shit, you're gonna have to go get one for yourself. It's just purple, let's move on. These nipples are pointing up to the heavens where God is looking down upon humanity and frowning. Also, no, you can't cover them. They're always visible. You wanna know how I feel about it? Good. What, you thought I had shame? I do, but not for this. Anyway, the first thing that's probably gonna jump out to you is either, ooh, tits, or it's these proportions. They're surprisingly similar to my jeeg here, minus the wide shoulders. These are proportions that some people will despise, and personally, I wasn't really down for it. But eventually I did grow to like it. However, there are some things that I'll never grow to like. This is a bit off topic, but we're gonna talk about this anyway. I have nothing but respect for how well Leslie06 is able to faithfully recreate the original illustration. However, maybe this should have been adapted rather than faithfully recreated, or maybe this illustration should have been made to a figure to begin with. This is incredibly subjective, and I'm biased towards generally disliking these kind of poses. The logic behind them is that you're getting a full 3/4 view of both ass and titty in a single view. You might be able to do this in real life, but you do kind of have to force it. And, you know, regardless, it does look unnatural as fuck. These proportions also really don't help. For a 2D illustration, I can kind of see why you'd want this. But for a figure, if I'm looking at titty and I want to see ass, I can just do this. Speaking of ass, this ass looks like ass. And I mean that in a bad way. It really pains me to say that the ass on an Erica figure looks like ass in a bad way, but here we are, and I am very, very disappointed. I can kind of understand the reasoning, but the execution is rather unfortunate. The only way this works is if you look at her from a bit of a distance and cover her in shade, which, why the fuck would you do that? You might also be able to notice a tad bit of a different color here, because these are different materials. So again, this is rather unfortunate. Now, I can't say I'm all that mad about this because I already have the best Erica ass I can ask for right here, but this still isn't good. And I would prefer something more like what Aqua has here, or some other option that is less awkward. This outfit, on the other hand, is like a combination of a magical girl costume and a wrestling costume, which I don't mean in a bad way because those are both things I think are sick. So I'm pretty down for this. I would kind of prefer either her actual magical girl outfit or just something more in theme over this one outfit that showed up in this one illustration in this one art book. But I can see why they didn't go for her actual magical girl outfit. Something I would kind of like from this is if you could take the skirt off. Not because I have a thing for leotards, but this also gets in the way of articulation. It does, however, make sense why this isn't a feature. See how this lines up? Now, if we look at her ass, it doesn't, and I'm bothered by this a bit more than I'd expect to be. That being said, this might be surprising with all my complaints, but I actually really like this. Aside from my general affection for this character, there's just something I find really appealing about this. And not in the way you're thinking, but also conceptually. This is much like an articulated cast-off scale figure kind of thing. Let me explain. We have this, which looks like anime hair coloring, and there's this, with something closer to illustration hair coloring. You also get more gradients in the paintwork, giving it that extra bit of quality over what a Figma would have, making it a bit more similar to a scale figure. Now, of course, some people dislike this because it's articulated, which means visible segmentation. It's not particularly subtle, and I can understand why people dislike it, but I like articulation, so I don't mind this trade-off. Now, if this still all sounds good to you, there are some things that I'm sure will make this an immediate turn-off for some people, as far as buying one for yourself, that is. The figure is rather pricey, and since it's distributed by Native, it's limited, so good luck with the aftermarket. And if that's still okay with you, well, either Guts is a manlet, or these have a completely different scale. In fact, she looks a bit more in scale with the Space Marine, which is really fucking weird considering that this is a Primaris. But I digress. The articulation actually feels pretty okay, but the range leaves a bit to be desired, which is the opposite of the Jeeg review, which means this is also rather unremarkable, aside from the titty articulation. This works the same as Figma, so I'm not gonna bother. You get a standard but otherwise nice smiling face. My personal favorite is this more expressive smiling face. A rather bland looking, face. And I'm not sure exactly what this is, but I'm guessing it's the watching someone get fucked without a condom face, which with how this usually goes in this hentai, I'm not sure why I should be surprised. You get 4 pairs of hands and surprisingly no fists. To replace the hands, you know how this works. Okay, fine, I'll say the thing. Yeah, she kinda does have yaoi hands, but so do I. So I don't care. The only rod going into these hands is going to be this. If yours happens to fit, my condolences. Anyway, just take this off and slide this in. I honestly kinda like how this looks, I think it's quite nice. So this is where the cast-off in cast-off becomes cast-off. That doesn't make any sense. Basically, you can rip her tits off and replace them with these exposed ones. I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to use the cast-off parts of the cast-off figures. You could say that's counterintuitive, but I like design things or design cohesion over just tits. But if you find how the pink looks a bit off-putting color-wise because they're covered by the transparent costume, which to be fair did take me some getting used to, or you're just horny, these look pretty alright. Much like these McFarlane figures, you get this stand thing that you just plug into one of her feet, which are kind of meh but do work as you might expect. I've also been using this for most of the review because she has these perplexing heels and can't really stand too well without it. Aqua, Mazinger, Erica. Overall, I do quite like this, but much like my Figma Tanya review, this is more attributed to my affection for this character than the figure itself being particularly good. However, I guess I can recommend this if you want an articulated Erica Kuromoto figure, and don't mind the scale or the price. Otherwise, no.
What's up?
Oh. Hello. And hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the new Tenga model that you're supposed to shove up your ass. I'm not really sure I get the point of this, because you can just do that with the normal Tenga. I guess the fist does give it more range, although maybe it's a texture thing. But I wouldn't know, because I spent my $300 on that jig. Okay, no. Today we're looking at the Tenga Robo Mazinger Z. It just looks like a Tenga, it doesn't have the functionality. However, anything can be a cocksleeve if you're brave enough. Goddamn shipping. A Tenga is something that you put your cock into. Mazinger is a classic giant robot from the 70s. You see the problem here? Can you explain it to me? Because I don't. The first opening of Shin Mazinger is a song about fucking. This is one of the tamer things I could be talking about here in regards to Gonagai just being a goddamn legend. Actually, speaking of Shin Mazinger, it's funny that there's this, and there's also a Mazinger that transforms into a hand. But anyway, as far as being a Mazinger-themed Tenga, this looks pretty alright. Whereas the robot mold looks like something that turns into a Mazinger-themed Tenga, which is the point, so I guess this is also pretty alright. I'm pretty sure someone's gonna try to use this against me at some point. So I guess I'll elaborate on this. Because this is kind of a joke figure, the compromises from being able to transform make it look more shit. Which in this case works in its favor, as it's there, I guess. By the way, the arms of this can't go forward. There is a constant debate about design functionality over rule of cool. So let's talk about the functionality of a Scrander on a Tenga. The Scrander on Mazinger is what allows it to fly, which means that a Tenga with a Scrander would be able to self-propel on your boy's dick. I can see a market for that. So this is functional design to a T. Someone at Good Small HQ was like, let's put a fist on a Tenga. And you know what? I respect that. Tenga stand. Tenga stand. Aqua, Mazinger, Mazinger, Mazinger. Overall, this is fine. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today I'm looking at the Frame Action Meister Govarian. Psycho Armor Govarian is an anime by Knack. Not that one. That one. I don't think they exist anymore. The extent of my knowledge of this series goes like this. It exists. For this video I did actually watch a bit of the show, and yeah, it definitely does exist. I will say the opening song fucking slaps. But there's a reason why this is obscure, and that's because the show it's not very good. If I had to explain why, it's that there's a bit of a pacing issue and a lack of world building, to the point where it feels like things just happen. Now, rather than an indication of quality, a lot of the time, figure prices are based on how niche they are, so this one is a bit pricey. Also, some would say Govarian is a shit name, because it sounds like ovarian. I would say that's like saying Gay King is a bad name. If you pronounce it Govarian, like a yellow boy, I think it's fine. I guess I can't make the joke about how this kid's name is Puke now. Oh well, boxes. I will say Govarian doesn't look all that cool in the show. If this was anime accurate, I might not have bought it. So whoever designed this, you get both of these because you did a great fucking job. Some designs are perpetual nightmares that I could never wake from, but this looks awesome. When it comes to figures of designs that are dated in a way that looks either silly or in this case incredibly inconsistent, I really like it when the design is altered in a way that's a lot more appealing, while also maintaining the original feel of that design. As a testament to that, I hadn't seen the Govarian design for a while, and when I first saw this, I didn't think this was a redesign, although that might be because the original design just kinda looks like Mazinger. And yes, I know that Govarian was just someone asked Go Nagai to make Mazinger, but not Mazinger, but also still Mazinger. That's not quite what this is, and I like that about it. Anyway, sculpt work here is pretty good. There are unfortunately the usual shitty seams on this and even on the accessories, something I'm as motivated to defend as figure companies are motivated to actually do something about visually intrusive seams. Paintwork and bare plastic here don't look super high-end, but don't look cheap either. Something I don't give as much credit as I probably should is how some robot figures integrate the joints in a way that look like a functional part of the robot instead of just joints. It's a practice I very much appreciate. It's also why articulated robot figures tend to work better than people. Speaking of joints, let's talk about the articulation. And, it's fine. Start the music. Actually, these parts are unintuitive, but aside from that, the articulation for this is pretty good. So this is Govarian, and this is Barian. Ha 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 ha. That was a pretty bad joke. I'm now going to explain the joke. So this head right here is designed by Masami Obari, who is one of the most prolific mecha designers in the business. I do like a lot of his stuff, but I don't like this, so we're not going to talk about this anymore. Also, if I'm remembering correctly, this whole thing is designed by Obari, which, if so, again, both of these. You have this immaculately detailed fist of the Psycho Crush. Okay, no, this is just a green fucking fist, and it's honestly kinda pathetic looking. I'm not even gonna bother defending it because this is a beam attack in the show, and there's no beam effect here. Yeah, fuck off. To put the sword in the sword-holding hand, you don't need to. These come already attached. I actually kinda like this. The hands don't use the awful, tiny little pieces of shit ball joints like SH Figuarts and Robot Damashis. This uses the Chad pegs that are easy to put in and easy to take off, which makes this even more convenient. You also get these. Sentinel stand. Something I really appreciate from this is that it has this little thing that makes sure the figure is straight. I really like this because I don't like gay figures. Aqua, Zaku, Mazinger, Mazinger, Mazinger. Overall, I do quite like this, but generally I wouldn't recommend it, unless you really want a Govarian figure for whatever reason. But being a Sentinel figure, this is rather pricey, especially considering this is all plastic. However, this might be the only Govarian figure made in the last decade, if not more, and it's kinda nice that it's not terrible. Hello, hey, and meow. This is Zerogokin Reviews, and it's Catboy time. Because today we're looking at the Polinian Shamrock. This is made by Daibuddy Productions for their Robot Neanthroponi Polinian series franchise. Cinematic universe. I think it has lore, and I honestly don't know much about it. I do know that Daibuddy made this as a garage kit at some point, which, like, bro, please get the license for that and release a pre-painted version, because I'd very much like to have one of those. Yoko, your robot is hotter than you. I'd fuck a robot. And yes, I know there are legally dubious versions of this that you can buy, but I'd rather not. There are also garage kits. It do be a box. This is a robot Catboy, and it looks like a robot Catboy. I don't know where to go with this. Well, I do know one thing we could talk about. Unlike some figures, this has a glorious bulge. I don't want to play with you anymore. As I've said in a previous review, the joints and segmentation here aren't a concession on the design, but rather a faithful recreation of said design. In other words, this is a design translated to figure form with minimal compromise. The only visually intrusive seams are these on the joints and this on the head, but considering their function, I don't see any way around it. Now, the joints and segmentation are a good thing in this case. But if you're gonna make your robot person look too much like a person, I feel like you should probably just make a person. Don't get me wrong, I'd probably buy one of these, but I don't think this utilizes or is made better by the robot part of being a robot person, and I'd probably prefer if this was a person. You do not need to agree with me, but this is just what I feel about a lot of Polinians. However, I don't feel that way about Shamrock here. He is a beautiful robot boy, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This is further reinforced by a very nice sculpt, and this is a lovely, say it with me everybody, robot ass. Something I don't really like, and this is a very minor complaint, is how these joints that I think would be better if they have these circles on both sides don't have them. Although if this is intentional, then I guess that's fine. Speaking of joints, articulation feels a bit more inconsistent, but the range is about the same as a Figma. Except you don't get any of this. Just start. It's just the usual, except the back can come off for some reason. You get a smile, an open smile, and my personal favorite, you know how these work, and these are what you get. The last one actually is different. You have to take out the joint to put these in, and now you can arm him with his arm. I know some of you are rolling your eyes, but this actually doesn't come with anything to put in these hands, aside from the parts of the robot itself. This is probably for using accessories from other Polinians. However, I still don't know what the point of the fake joints are, though. I'm guessing this is here so you can make your other Polinians have dick, which I think is very respectable, and I approve. There is actually a difference here, though. This is a single piece, whereas the original part has separation. If this is for replacing the crotch, then I don't want to hear about it. So you saw this earlier. I don't know what that means. I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with threesomes. Polinian stand. It's just another one of these in a more creative shape. Wow. Getter, Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Lagann, Shin. Overall, this is pretty alright. I can recommend it if you want a robot catboy femboy and don't mind the price. Otherwise, no. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the Aquamarine Moe Getter 1. Moe Getter. Am I weird for owning this? Not for this, no. I didn't get Getter 2 and 3 because I'm not exactly sure why. I'm also not entirely sure why these exist. But it makes more sense than this, so I don't think I have anything to say about it. This also isn't anything new for Getter Robo. Robot Girl Z exists, which isn't a good show, but I really like that one scene where Panzeroid shows up. I wish my Panzeroid would show up. The thing about the company that made this Aquamarine is that I actually ordered one of their most recent products, which ended up getting cancelled because they're fucking dead. COVID was the camel that broke Aqua's marine, which, most tragically, nobody's picked up the bunny lart. I did end up getting one of these, though. I'm gonna just hold this because I don't want to put it on the floor. Only assembly required is to shove this tail into the back hole. I don't have a problem with the decision to make this cat-like. It's not a bad idea considering the ears of the original design, although they arguably look more like bat ears, which would make sense considering future developments and other developments that we're not going to talk about. I do own a few cats, as in actual cats, this Catboy figure, and I'm not entirely sure what animal this is, but it's got cat energy, I'll say that. We can go on, but I quite like cats, so I'm not going to complain. Also, if, Batman could call himself Batman, then I think this is fine. Like, what animal has ears like this? Either way, despite how the figure quality isn't all that great, I like how this looks. It's cute. This looks quite faithful to the original illustration, a concept that is lost on some. But, teach their own. Also, according to this box, this is designed by Siomaru Yasuyuki, which if I search, the first result is incest. Speaking of incest, the articulation isn't particularly good, but I guess it's functional. They could have just made this into a statue, but they didn't, and I appreciate that.
Hand it over, that thing, your ass.
These are on ball joints, and I know this might look whimsical, but I had an utterly horrible time attaching these. I genuinely hated every moment, and my life is worse off because of it. Putting that aside, I'm not particularly enthusiastic about these cat hands, but I guess they're okay. Here are the rest. These look nice and are easy to put in. Maybe a bit too easy to put in. Getter, Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Lagann, Shin. Overall, this Getter is moe. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today I'm looking at the 1000 Toys Inui Juzo from No Gun's Life, which is a manga that was adapted into an anime that I didn't watch. Until I got this figure. I finished both seasons within 24 hours, and despite it being a bit bullshit, I did enjoy it. The show is about a noir detective who has a gun for a head, and along with Narancia and Hibiki, they occasionally investigate crimes. Sort of. It's mostly about him having a gun for a head, which isn't necessarily bad, but the show does feel like it should be a lot better than it actually is, which sounds a bit harsh, but I don't really know how else to explain it. To its credit, there are some things I do quite like about it. It's animated by Madhouse, so the animation is pretty good for the most part. Sci-fi settings where people are for some reason over-the-top cyborgs is an aesthetic I really like. The main character is voiced by Junichi Suwabe, which means that this is probably the closest I'm going to get to an articulated dandy figure. I also like how, instead of being about, what does it mean to be human? It has a theme of how people end up being taken advantage of, and driving that is the main character who doesn't want to be used as a tool. So it's actually really profound that his head is a gun that he can't fire himself. Someone needs to fire it for him, because it's not possible for him to pull the trigger. Oh. I think you get what I mean by bullshit now. It's a good theme. However, there's no part of your body you can't reach with your hands. You're gonna need to make some holes, but you can grab your internal organs. I believe in you. Although maybe his neck is too dummy thick to reach it. Okay, I don't know why he doesn't use his gun head, but he does have another trigger, which he actually can't pull himself. Until he can. Again, bullshit. There's also for some reason the usual anime bullshit, particularly with specific shots being prevalent. If you want to do this, then fine. I've reviewed hentai figures, but it really doesn't help the more serious tone your show seems to want to have. Speaking of bullshit, this box is fine. Probably the biggest reason I actually managed to watch the entire show was that Juzo is just really nice to look at, especially with Madhouse's animation. Like, I bought this without even watching the show because this design is just great. And I think they did a really good job at adapting this into figure form. The shapes, the proportions, and colors are really nice. I think this looks a lot better than the Figma, which is good because that might not ever get made at this point. Honestly, this is an amazing figure, but it feels pretty nice and looks really fucking cool that I just want to pose this chunky robot daddy. Oh, yes. A cool little detail I noticed was that his fingernails were given a glossy finish. And I guess while we're here, the joints look decent. I'm not huge on the separation for the pants, but with the articulation in mind, it's probably the best solution for this. Although some people really don't like the knees for the 1000 Toys figures. I think it's because they're a bit ugly, since they don't have a knee covering the front of the joint. Which is a fair perspective, but I don't really care. I guess it might look better if it matched the color of the legs, but painting the joints would be no less than folly, and no more than utter stupidity. The other contentious addition to the 1000 Toys figures are the cloth jackets. But first, so this is an assembly. This is disassembly. I'm not the biggest fan of cloth clothes on figures, but he does show up enough without his coat that I think it's worth having it removable. Like, it's almost always off when he fights, and he doesn't have it for most of Season 2, although you do also see him naked for a bit. I am now convinced that this is a tragic character, but yeah, I don't really have a problem with the coat. It also has wire through all the edges, which is nice. I guess I can also say that about the articulation. I really like that this mouth can open. It's actually pretty clever too. Although if you force it too far, his upper lip will eject. But otherwise, articulation is generally pretty good and feels pretty good. Although for some reason his hands are only on a very limited ball joint instead of something like this, it does make it easier to replace the hands, you would think. But because these are rubber, I had to loosen them up first. So accessory section is over. That's it. You just get hands. Okay, no, this isn't a... It is a hand, but it's not his hand. It's a hand robot thing that first appears floating, and then grows feet and never floats again. But yeah, aside from these papercraft cigarettes that I'm not going to bother with, that's all you get. I can't really think of much that I'd like him to have aside from a manual. I like how his flustered head looks. It's funny looking, but it's also not a part of the show I liked. I just don't think the show is heavy enough to need this kind of comic relief, so it ends up feeling out of place. His other form would probably be a hassle to make, and would add like 5,000 yen to the price. It's not something I care much for anyway. Speaking of not caring, Sentinel... Stan. Psych! Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Lagann, Shin. Overall, I wish Wachowski got wachowed.
Watch out!
I also quite like this. Although being a Sentinel priced thing means it's not an easy recommend, so we're gonna have to go for the classic. I can recommend this if you like how this looks and don't mind the price. Otherwise, no. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today I'm looking at the Nendoroid Lancer Artoria Pendragon from FGO. I guess they made this for the movie, I didn't watch it. I have read a lot of her material. It was all fan material, but I can confidently say that she's my favorite Fate girl. And she's not Saber. There's a pretty big difference. She has a lance, thus she's a Lancer. I'm also going to call her Lartoria or Larch from now on. Okay, technically she is the same person, as in King Arthur, but a different aspect of their legend. She's also more mature in the other way as well, and isn't an annoying child. She's a fucking king. She exudes competence and confidence. She also looks fucking adorable. That would usually be my transition to the look segment, but this is my first experience with a Nendoroid box, and how these accessories don't have a place here is kinda fucked up. But you can store them in the faceplates. No fucking clue what you're supposed to do with the stand. Anyway, looks. Sometimes I find the Nendoroid aesthetic to be a bit meh, but here is thankfully one of the times I think it works really well. Actually, this is the first time I'm reviewing a Nendoroid. I should probably talk about that. I think that Nendoroids are probably the best example to explain the direction that the figure industry has gone. Like, since the first Nendoroid in 2006, the prices have gone up. While there were some increases in quality in that time, there were also changes that should have reduced the price. So then, why? Well, there's one thing that has changed. Instead of the double digits of the last decade, now there are hundreds of Nendoroids made every year. What I'm saying is the reason is not quality, but rather it's about variety. Prices have gone up to allow them to make more kinds of things and still be profitable. I'm not saying this makes their prices good and reasonable, but considering the media landscape now, it's a direction that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, I was talking out of my ass, all that could have been complete fucking bullshit. As for my personal opinion, I don't actually care much for Nendoroids. I generally avoid them This is actually the first one I've bought with a box. I just really like Lart, and this turned out very nicely. I now have a little king to go with my big king. As for the design of Lart herself, I obviously like it. And unlike the people in the comments section, I wouldn't group her with the Saber label. She doesn't just look like regular-ass Saber cosplaying. You cannot get this with these assets. Some people are also really bothered by her tits. Like, this is Fate. At this point, do you really expect decency? Although, yeah, I do like the armor. I hope that the Figma has armor parts, which this Nendroid doesn't have. As you can see from these arms, they're trying to minimize the amount that joints compromise the design. It's basically a statue with minimal articulation. But first, fisting is $300.
It's physical with your hand, but for some reason it's also more emotional. It's more psychological too.
Before we begin, either a lot of parts on this easily fucking fall off, or I might have not gotten a good copy of this. I don't have a lot of experience with Nendroids, but this older one is pretty solid. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the 1532nd Nendroid has quality control issues. Anyway, something I do like about Nendroids is that pretty much all the faceplates are compatible. Although it is because I assume that they're all made with the same base, which is arguably a bit shit. But either way, you get stern, yelling, and fucking adorable. So this comes attached in the box, but consistency can fuck my ass, so I'm gonna call it an accessory. Like, it's not actually attached to anything, it just sits on her shoulders getting in the way of head movement, which it does stay in place, but since her head comes off easily, it falls off for that reason instead. And it does get in the way, so you have to take it off to change her arms. Because she doesn't have articulation, she needs bent arms. This hand-on-chest one is the only fancy one she gets, despite it not being very fancy. These can go on all of the arms except for the fancy one, and I got two right-holding hands for some reason. Again, quality control issues. The arms and hands fortunately don't fall off when wielding her lance. Here's her lance. Here's her effect lance. Here's her lance effect. My Panzeroid still hasn't arrived. This is Dun Stallion. This is also an modestly articulated figure. It's also pretty cute. Nendroid stand. It's just a holy piece of plastic that keeps the figure in place. Wow. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, she small. Price, not small. That's about it. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and fuck this gay Earth. Let's talk about Ray Earth, the Sentinel Ryobot Ray Earth, a robot from a series that involves Japanese schoolgirls who go sparkly and nude to fight with robots in a fantasy world. In weeb words, this is a Mahou Shoujo Mecha Isekai series. Aside from the Isekai part, that sounds pretty sick. It's also a really good deconstruction of the Mahou Shoujo genre, because if you actually dissect all the elements of Mahou Shoujo and take them to their logical conclusion, you will almost definitely end up with Aura Battler Dunbine. This is just a joke, by the way. Dunbine is very different. They don't even look similar. Okay, that does look similar, but this is still a joke. They're both old isekai mecha animes, but their individual takes on a fantasy world are quite different. We'll talk about Dunbine in due time, but in Ray Earth, the fantasy world is called Saphiro, and it's very orky, in the sense that willpower and belief can shape reality. It's also a fantasy world that really likes the Star of David. I can't enjoy it as much as someone who grew up with it, but as you can probably tell, I did watch the show. I actually watched the entire first season for this video, and I'm a grown-ass man who yelled at a kid's show for girls for not showing me robots. It took 10 episodes for one to show up, and God damn it. There are finally robot fights at episode 19. That being said, I'm gonna be honest and say that I actually kinda like this show. I do enjoy a good shoujo manga every now and then, so it's not really surprising. It is a kid's show, so it's not a show I could give my full attention to. But I did actually really enjoy elements of the story. Oh, and of course there's plushes of this piece of shit. Box feels weirdly sturdy for a Rylebot, so that's good. They only made Ray Earth and not the other two, which is a shame because I like them. If this is how they were going to do it, it might have been better to just make the, you know... I'm glad they didn't because I like Ray Earth's design a lot more. I did bring up earlier about how it looks like an Aura Phantasm design, which are some of my favorite things ever. So if your robot looks like an Aura Phantasm design, then it's probably fucking great. Ray Earth is like Fire Turbine. I fucking love it. As for this figure, I do really like how this looks. This is basically just the Ray Earth design translated into figure form. They did a very good job at that, although I can see some of the comments this video is going to get already. So let's change the future and talk about why you would get this over the Motoroids, which for the price of this, you can get all three of them and still have some money left. Whereas for the price, this is a bit underwhelming. And even disregarding the price, there are a few issues I have with it. But other than how this is pre-painted, pre-assembled, there is a good reason to get this instead, and that's that this is an adaptation, whereas the Motoroids are a reinterpretation. The shapes are sharper and more robotic. Part of Ray Earth's charms for me are its shapes, which is why I don't really like the Motoroids. But if you do, then you should definitely get those over this. The size difference isn't that significant, and the die-cast here is quite minimal. Based on my friend's experience, the Motoroids are a mixed bag. Some of them are great, some of them are not so much so. So I don't know how good these are going to be, but I do know that for a Rylebot, this isn't great. And that does also mean the articulation is a bit of a mixed bag. For aforementioned reasons, the figure isn't great to handle, and the legs work in a similar way to old Revoltechs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, it does work, but it's just unconventional in a somewhat unintuitive way. I don't understand why they couldn't just do it like the 1000 Toys figures. Like, I believe 1000 Toys is a central offshoot. Anyway. No shit, Hikaru Shido. You get all that you'd need, and they're convenient to attach. So I don't really have anything to say about them. Instead of attaching to the arm, it is just another arm. So when you first see him flying, if we ignore how he's T-posing, the weird thing here is that the shield is somehow in this position. Otherwise, visually, the shield is probably the most striking part of this design, and it's fucking sick. Maybe not quite as much, but this sword is also fucking sick, and can even be fucking lit. These fire effects are real cool looking, but they're also a real pain. This one doesn't stay in, and you have to use the stand because they're too heavy. Speaking of the devil, Sentinel stand. There's nothing wrong with it. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, it's a hard recommend, but if you like how it looks, don't mind the price, and can live with the issues, I guess I can recommend it. Otherwise, no.
Van?
Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today I'm looking at the Cheeto Serum 22 Tanio Adder. I probably completely butchered that, and this is a line by Good Small Company. Sort of like Frame Arm Girls and their unfortunate acronym, except without the unfortunate acronym, and instead of being anime girl versions of robots, this line consists of depictions of what happens when you are injected with unfiltered Cheeto dust. The Cheeto Serum makes you about 1/12 in size, and transforms you into a Huke design. If you are not familiar, they're the character designer for Black Rock Shooter and Steins Gate. I have seen a bit of Steins Gate. I like the art style, and I do like Kurisu, although I mostly just like her voice actor. Whereas for Black Rock Shooter, I'm familiar with its Hatsune Miku roots, and watching this has given me crazy nostalgia. But other than how, for some reason, I played the PSP game, I don't know much about it. I do have a few of the Figmas, because I really like these designs. Similarly, the Cheeto Serum line has a pretty interesting style. I really like the design flourishes, but unsimilarly, I can't say I'm too interested by the designs themselves. Notably, one of them takes a design quirk I really dislike, which is when characters have whole segments of hair that are entirely a different color, and takes it to a whole new level. I fucking hate this. But otherwise, looking at the other ones, I'm a bit mixed. These two are the one I should probably be talking about. However, I have no interest in these, so we're only going to be looking at the cats. Well, a cat. I only got one of them. Why did I get the black one? Well, it's somewhat harder to see the joints and separation, which makes it a bit better to look at. It's also fucking spooky month, idiot. Although I really hate the black cat superstition shit. Get a black cat. There's nothing wrong with them. This box is like a little armory box, which for the size of this is appropriate. You saw the title of the video. It's a cat kit. It's a very simple build, so I have nothing to say here. It's a cat. Okay, no, it's a stylized cat. Okay, fine. It's a stylized cat that's quite cute. I am a cat person, and I approve of this cat. I'm not really sure what you're supposed to infer from that. Looking at this box, maybe they're actually supposed to be like porcelain cat automatons. In other words, the segmentation might be justified. Although as much as I do like the shapes here, with the segmentation for articulation, even if it's intentional, it can be a bit rough, especially with the white one. Speaking of things being rough, and articulation, this is a tiny model kit, so it does make sense, but yeah, like most of my life decisions, this comes apart very easily. So let me preface this by saying, this comes with a head with closed eyes, and a lot of tails. These are very, very small, and are probably incredibly easy to lose, especially considering that this is black. So like it or not, the only thing we're going to talk about is the box stand. The box part of this works quite well. The stand part of this doesn't. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. That seems pretty small. This is one of those Frame Arm Girl style. This isn't 1/12 scale, and non-scale doesn't sound that appealing. So let's say this is 1/1 scale. But yeah, overall, sure, you can buy it. I'll give you my permission. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and Halloween is around the corner, but today, we're looking at the Alpha Max Dark Advent Kraken Dress Lania DX version. There are two versions of this kit. There's the DX version, presumably DX stands for Deluxe, which is what I have here. It comes with some additional parts, in other words, you'll be seeing Donovan later. And then there's the version that doesn't come with the additional parts. Ugh. It even sounds disgusting. It's called the STD version. Why would you buy something called the STD version? What the fuck is wrong with you? You might ask, what the fuck is wrong with me? Considering the last time I reviewed something from Alpha Max, despite how that turned out and that turned out, I've been told that for the kind of kit this is, it's actually quite good. So we'll see about that. Besides, the Dark Advent line is one I've had my eye on, for reasons. However, I did not buy the first one, because I like how this hair looks in the illustration, but I don't like how it looks on the kit itself. They are making a version with a different hairstyle that I like more, so I might pick that up. It's called the underwear version. Is that not what's already going on here? And yes, I do have the Egyptian one pre-ordered. Visually, that's probably my favorite of the ones they've made so far. Either way, this is the first one I bought, and this box is atrociously large, but understandably because this is a model kit. So let's talk about the assembly. This is the first time we're talking about a model kit. Shush. I actually had my friend build this for me, so I'll give you his footnotes. Despite having quite prominent under-boobing, the runners she came on do not feature under-gating. Also, the manual is in color. Like, genuinely, being able to easily tell which parts are which is really nice for actually putting this together. And once this is actually together, this looks pretty good. It does look like a model kit, which is expected from something that's predominantly unpainted. It also feels like a model kit, although that's more relevant for later. I will say that I quite like this design. This is designed by Photon, whose artwork I am decently fond of. Although judging by their previous works and certain inclusions with this kit, I'm going to have to assume that not every aspect of this was their idea. If you are unfamiliar, Photon designed those characters in Shambro's Ultimate. They also did the character and mechanical design for Rockquin Suiho, which I know isn't as famous as Xenoblade 2, but unlike Xenoblade 2, I don't have to give fucking Nintendo money to experience it. Although I guess she is kind of a squid kid. Of course, you can take this off, and while I do think the girl underneath is well crafted, much like Giorno with Haruno hair, it feels like something is not right, as if the laws of nature have been horribly perverted, although maybe not that dramatic. For this, Haruno Shiobana's fucked up, kinda like Lovecraft, in more ways than one. I'd actually be interested in like a Lovecraftian design, but I feel like it'd be more along this line than something actually wild and interesting, so I'm okay with mechanical white gold squid. This is actually a squid, by the way. Squids have 10 tentacles. This is a squid. When you think of squids, you probably don't think about articulation, but that's what we're going to talk about now. I think it's quite similar to Kotobukiya's Megami Device line in its range, but my experience with that line is quite limited, so take that with an appropriate amount of salt. Her chest also comes off pretty easily. I guess some people would say that's realistic. Actually, a lot of this comes off quite easily, and unlike a lot of these kinds of kits, the hair here is plastic rather than a more flexible material. Generally, the plastic quality here is questionable. And appropriately, this is where I question the people telling me this is quite good. I think with the context that this is their second kit ever, this is sort of acceptable, and is definitely more acceptable than the Jig. However, there are a few rather significant improvements to be made with this line, but for now... Changing the faces is actually quite easy and stay in quite well. You get 6 with one being blank. You can attach these decals, but I can get off to this just fine. I'm definitely not just saying that because I don't want to bother attaching them. And that's a lot of funny blue hands. It is a kit, so I don't see any reason not to, although quite a few of these are from the DX version. The people selling this care about these as much as I do. There's only one picture of these in the promotional images. Also, if you take these off, it looks like she's missing something. Because, you know, she is. And yeah, I'd rather have her use the mace, which is in most of the promotional images, rightfully so because this looks much better. Its function is only as a weapon, so it doesn't look weirdly forced. You can also attach the jellyfish part to this, which I think looks pretty cool attached, but unattached, I have to question how these are supposed to be jellyfish. I didn't know what these were, but even after being told, like, a jellyfish? Really? They don't have the consistency of jellyfish, but neither do these. I don't know why I used that as a segue, but I guess much like these, it was an option. However, this part does have a squishier consistency. Cool. You could see these as weird bulbous nipple extremities, but I just see them as ball joints. I'm very tired. I guess I somehow forgot to fix this part of the script. They actually changed them to these meat tubes, which is honestly more disturbing, but from a practicality standpoint, this is an improvement. We all need our meat tubes. I've seen the fucking analytics, I know.
It's bondage gay website. It's all male.
You can attach the jellyfish parts here for a truly deluxe experience. Speaking of DX experiences, emphasis on the D. Whoever it is at Alphamex who keeps insisting on adding phalluses to these kits, you are the finest of gentlemen and have both my gratitude and my respect. Boy, are these parts special. She doesn't just come with a cock, she comes with a multi-cock. Say with me, everybody, multi-cock. It's like a cock, but it's got cock surrounding it. What an exciting feature, unlike the stand. Okay, this is alright, but why is their made in China written so obnoxiously large here? While we're on the subject of size, Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, I guess I can recommend it if you don't mind the problems and the price. Otherwise, no.
親父見てくれ俺はヘッドマスター
Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the Figma Slan. In other words, you get to see the first and probably last time the Donovan censorship is applied to an actual Berserk figure.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
Slan, the God Hand's horny finger. Named the Whore Princess of the Uterine Sea by the Skull Knight. Fuck you! Actually, why isn't there a Skull Knight and Zod Figma? Making those would be a lot more sensible than the God Hand. What the fuck? Back to Slan. Those of you who are familiar with 40k lore are probably thinking about something similarly named from that universe. Yes, the reptile fuckers called the Slan, who I believe... Also, I'm pretty sure what y'all were actually thinking about was Slanesh. Which, I mean, there are some parallels, but Slan is more of a really powerful horny person than an actual god who was fucked into existence by shitty space elves. Oh, right, and Conrad, the God Hand's pog finger, sure. Disease Man is shaped like a louse and is pretty damn thick. He's in the God Hand, so he's probably a dick. I actually don't know, he hasn't shown up much. Kinda like boxes in my reviews. I mostly talk about how the figure looks, which in this case, this looks alright. But first of all, I'm kind of okay with her not having a gooch, because I cannot confirm to you if she even has one to begin with. It's almost always either hidden or not drawn in, unless I miss something. Although the movie version that this is based on does have a bush, so that's an inaccuracy. I do feel like there should also be a non-articulated version of this, considering how restrictive articulation is with this design. Was it really worth having this be articulated? I mean, I do like the option, but visually I'm left a little bit wanting, and more importantly, there aren't many options for non-articulated Slan figures. All the Art of War stuff is horribly expensive and visually questionable, where the Prime 1 statue is more appropriately priced for the size, but is nonetheless also horribly expensive. And while I do agree with how detail is increased with the size, which is something I'll talk about more in a different video, I really don't like how this looks. She looks like a bitch, which is appropriate for Slan, but I think my issue with this is more attached to the realistic take they're going for here. I'm not getting a that's a pretty good take on the design, but rather a that's a pretty good cosplay of this character, which I think is a problem I have with a lot of realistic takes on characters. So in comparison, I like how this one looks the most out of the available options, but that's evidently a low bar. It feels weird saying this right after that, but I feel this looks a bit too anime, or maybe too Figma, which for a Figma I think is fine, but more subjectively, I wish the facial features were more defined, like in the movie design that this is based on. I do think there's a middle ground here. The model in the Berserk Musou game isn't half bad. Honestly, a lot of the models in that game aren't bad either. It's just taken as a whole, the game looks like shit, which isn't too far off from how it plays. Putting that aside and putting this aside, the non-articulated Conrad looks a lot better, which isn't really what I'd want to say, but is the unfortunate truth. The paintwork here doesn't seem to be that much better, but the sculpt work doesn't look too anime or too Figma, and is not compromised by being articulated, despite the articulation being quite limited and impractical. Let me just show you what I mean by that. Much like the articulation, the accessories offer limited options. You get not horny, maybe a little horny, and big horny. You also get a selection of interchangeable hand parts to match different situations, which might sound exciting, but hold your horses, because of course it's a Figma, so it has a Figma stand. What is more exciting is a special feature Conrad has. If you put him next to your ear, you can hear the ocean. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, it doesn't matter if this is good or not. This thing goes for at least 30k yen on Japanese sites, so good fucking luck if you want one. Hello, and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the Snail Shell Phantom Machine Hotaru Dual Body Set. Snail Shell makes some cool stuff, but sometimes they confuse me. Like they have this line called GN Project, which consists of anime girls with, I guess, an animal theme. So this, which should fit that perfectly, is not part of the line. You wanna know what is? Yeah, let's move on. This, however, is not part of GN Project. Genki Kikaku. I don't know what that is, but this is pretty cool. When a figure comes with another figure, the first instinct is to pose it as if it is a stand, but I assume this is more like a Diavolo Doppio situation. She goes from docile to, I want her to step on my dick. If you like Dark Souls, there are some interviews you should read. You might find them revealing. Anyway, this is Hotaru, and this is Hotaru Reverse, a name that is similar to Devil Reverse, except it might not be nonsense. Although this could actually be Devil Rebirth, which is still nonsensical. However, my friend told me this, so it may not be correct. Hotaru is supposedly Ying. So Hotaru Reverse is Ying reversed. I'm going to assume you get what I'm saying. If not, well, you can just look at this box. Now let's look at how the figure looks, and I gotta say, this is quite nice. Normally I'd compare it to the illustration, which I guess I'm still gonna do here, but the illustration is actually quite different. It seems at some point this was supposed to look like this, and at some point it did look like this, but they eventually changed up the concept and I cannot find an uncensored version of it. So from what I can tell, the illustrator, whose name I am incapable of comprehending, did a really good job with both designs. I do think that... Why do I keep doing this? What the fuck is this? I do think I prefer the direction they eventually went with this, aside from the dress. This one is better. The end result here also has considerably more edge. That being said, more than anything, this activates the Blackrock shooter receptors in my brain. Although, I do find this a lot more appealing than the scythe-wielding character in that series, Dead Master. And similarly, as you can probably tell, I am mostly talking about Hotaru Reverse. Because Hotaru, while also quite nice, is kind of plain and has a stupid dress. She does, however, have some funky panties. I have several structural questions, but honestly I'd rather talk more about Hotaru Reverse. I do like that this is culturally enriched with details reminiscent of classical literature, as in she perpetually has an X-ray effect that is commonly featured in such literature as hentai. However, I do wish she had more defined spinal detail, like the Nuke Matrix Fox. But still, this is pretty cool. Something else that's pretty cool is that contemporary snail shell releases have articulation in their faces. Actually, it may be a bit more visually compromised by it, but articulation is generally better than, say, a Figma. And unlike their previous endeavor, the parts don't detach too easily. This is a very good thing because my copy of that figure actually broke because of this. Either way. You get depression, nothing, what you fucking deserve, crazy ass, and a masked face that is weirdly less expressive. You also get 2 different sets of bangs with punished variants. The back hair can be exclusively long or short. Also included is a horny variant of the long hair. Much like in real life, hands are optional. However, the options provided here are fairly standard, except for some reason the Satan hands have less holding options, which is strange because why would you equip non-reverse Hotaru with any of the weapons? Like, the promotional images basically confirmed this for me. Speaking of weapons... Okay, this scythe is cool and all, but who do I blame for that fucking name? By the way, I'm not done talking shit about these names, because we also have... Are you sure you don't mean whip swords? And of course, her iron halo, that is not iron, but is a halo, is called a hyper ring. Some of these names are pretty questionable. I did get them from Ami Ami. Because while the names on Shozi's store are better, they're also fucking liars. But with those names on Ami Ami, something that is nice is that this is just called Backpack. Although I don't know if this qualifies as one, mostly because I only have a vague idea as to what this is. Oh right, this thing. I don't really care about this, and honestly if they wanted me to care, they'd give me another one of these, because otherwise I have nowhere to put this. Well, there is, one place you can put it. The snail shell stand.
Oh, or not,
Unlike the last one, this doesn't look kind of ugly, it looks fine. However, as always, I do like the storage. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. You also get this if you pre-ordered it. It's like one of those Sumamare keychains. Overall, this is pretty good. I consider this to generally be an improvement. The price is pretty steep, but considering this comes with 2 figures, the price is relatively not terrible. Maybe. Hello, and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and it's time for CBT. Cute Boy Tuesday. It's not Tuesday? Well, too bad, because today we're looking at the Figma Stofo casual version. The stars have aligned with this release. It came out on June 21st, so not only did this release during Pride Month, you know what else came out on June 21st? That's right. June 21st is my birthday, which, yes, this video is horribly late. Maybe it was destiny, or perhaps it was fate. The last time I reviewed a Stofo figure, I got a lot of comments about fate lore. And let me just say, do you think I care that King Arthur is actually a woman and Merlin had to conjure up a cock for her so she could fuck a chick and have a son who's also actually a woman? Actually, I'm kinda into that. What were we talking about again? Oh right, yes, Fate, yes. Most of what I know about Fate comes from the various fan materials, which I've heard are very lore-friendly. But I've also watched Fate Zero, half of Unlimited Blade Works, I finished Fate Extella Link, and I played a bit of the uncensored visual novel in middle school. I got to the part where Tosaka was like, yo, Shiro, Saber's out of mana, so you need to give her a mana injection with your penis. Which at that point I stopped playing because I got bored. Speaking of being bored, here's the box. I will say I do like how this looks. I prefer this casual Stofo over usual Stofo. It might be because of the colors here, which, you know, maybe I'm biased. While we're on this subject, a Stofo seems to have more of a bunny affinity. I'm more of a cat person, but I won't say no to a bunny boy. There are also cat boys I would say no to. Actually, wait. What? Anyway, I also like that the shirt gives a more seamless impression. Even if it's nigh immediately broken, I still quite appreciate it. I am mostly just talking about the outfit, since the head is basically the same as the previous version. Fittingly, I'm just going to casually bring this up. I've gotten reports from people saying that there's a bulge now. I don't see it, but you know what? Our daddies taught us not to be ashamed of our dicks. Besides, we've tread this ground already. I will momentarily let this go. So now, I'm taking that ass. And you want me to, don't you? Wait, that's not right. Articulation. For some reason on my copy of the figure, his panties are loose, in the kind of way that it sort of appears like there's been a buildup of excrement in the posterior of the garment, as in it makes it look like he shit his panties, which some people are into, but personally I find it rather off-putting. Otherwise, articulation is standard Figma stuff. From the anime series Fate Apocrypha comes a Figma of the Rider of Black. Apparently this is the exhausted expression. I mean, that's one way to say it. You also get smiling, puffed out cheeks, and smug? I'm not really getting that kind of energy from this, but I guess you could say that. When a figure that is a different version of the same character is released, a problem that emerges is that you might end up getting, and by extension paying for, some of the same stuff all over again. So let me just say this right now. All of these hands are new. Technically. Since he's not wearing gloves this time. Otherwise there's a bit of overlap. He has a horn. Why? Yeah, that was fucking terrible. Get over here, I deserve it.
I live again.
Figma stand. And yes, we're here already. I wasn't prepared for this. Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Lagann, Shin. Hey, it fits. Oh, that's kind of fucked up. Overall, I think we can all agree that value for money has long been divorced from the equation. So, can I recommend this? Generally, and this applies to most figures, no. But if you want it, sure, I guess it's fine if you don't mind the price. I will say that the value proposition here is lesser than the average Figma, which does make sense considering the context of this figure. Maybe.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the McFarlane Toys Necron. I should probably explain what 40k is, but today is not that day. Just go watch a Sabaton AMV, you'll quickly find a Warhammer one, although it'll likely be about the Imperium of Man. And, I'm sorry, this isn't just something I think, this is objective fact. The Necrons are the most metal race in 40k. Shit. Anyway, how do I get home from here? I'm just gonna walk, it's fine. So, what is a Necron? Well, I guess they're angry Egyptians who were tricked into becoming tin cans by one of their gods. How could they have foreseen such an act from the one known as the, Deceiver? Sounds pretty trustworthy to me. Which, either way, might not have been the best idea, considering they later fought their gods and turned them into Pokemon. Originally, they were these cool, mysterious space Terminators, but nowadays they're essentially space Tomb Kings, which I like Tomb Kings, so it's not the worst thing. Besides, Warhammer was a significant part of my childhood, and I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Necrons. I actually thought that Dark Crusade came out later than Soulstorm, because it was inconceivable to my young mind that they would make a sequel that is basically the same game but worse. A giveaway would be that Soulstorm had more playable races. Yes, my favorite race, women. I've gone off track, but this is a rather simple figure, so there's not a lot to discuss here. I guess we could start by talking about how it looks. I've always liked the designs of the Necrons, which is why they were my first choice when I played Dark Crusade, which, might have been a bad idea. The sculpt of the McFarlane figures might be the best out of all the existing articulated Warhammer figures. When they're Xenos, they're definitely the most detailed. The problem comes from the painting, and what really sticks out to me here is this green. I get what they're going for, but it looks like shit. Speaking of which, this is more subjective, but I'm not particularly fond of the Zarkon Dynasty color scheme, especially in this case with how this brown looks in such a minimum expense paint job. It looks okay in some places and bad in others. This is generally the problem with their entire Warhammer line. They're cheaply produced figures of designs that demand more complexity, which means instead of people complaining that they're too expensive, people are going to complain about how they look. Which, while I do agree, considering how much they cost, I find complaining about it somewhat asinine. Yes, $20 is still money, but for reference, this costs $400. I really do hate talking about value proposition in regards to figures. There's so much ground to cover for something that's largely ignored by the figure industry anyway. The basic gist of it is this. Anything that looks really nice is probably expensive and likely won't be as good as you think your money is worth, whereas anything affordable is not going to look too nice and/or requires work. Not to say that's exclusive to cheaper figures. I do think that in this case, considering this is both pre-painted and pre-assembled, they're hitting above their belt here. Again, most of this looks okay, although their Primaris and various other figures are a bit more of a mixed bag. This can obviously be solved by painting it yourself, which commendably is something they do cater to. It probably does say something that I think the Primaris looks much better without color. Yeah, let's move on.
Future Gokin here. Before we move on, there were two fuck-ups that I noticed while editing. I'll get to the other one later, but first, look at the arms here. For some reason I thought this is just how they were, but if we look at official artwork and cinematics, they actually have forearms with fairly normal proportions, so I don't know what's going on here. I'll be back for that second fuck-up.
It's like the Doom 3 shotgun of articulation. I don't think I actually know what that means, but articulation is a bit more limited for the Necron in comparison to the Primaris, since they didn't use any double joints here, and both have the problem of the upper legs being frustratingly limited. If this was like a Necron load or something, I'd probably complain more. I wouldn't call it good, but for a warrior I think this is fine. Accessories for McFarlane figures are the bare minimum. It's not like you're not gonna equip this, because weapon-holding hands are the only hands you get. You should be thankful you even get a scarab. Or not. What do I even do with this? Even the tabletop miniatures put them on some kind of stand. Which you do get for the Necron, and you know the drill. I will refrain from yelling heresy, but I'm not happy. Granted, it does work fine, I guess. I still don't like the new logo.
Here's the other fuck-up I noticed. There's something a bit curvy about this Necron. His fucking gun, cause I don't know. I don't know why. They just are. I said they because this chainsword and power sword is bent as well. Weirdly enough, Eridan's thin-ass sword isn't. That's it from the future. Goodbye.
Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Lagann, Shin. Overall, it's fine. If you're like me and have more expensive tastes, you probably shouldn't get this. I don't know if I'll get more McFarlane stuff, but assuming I'm still doing this, there will probably be more Warhammer. Most likely the Joy Toy stuff, since they're speedrunning releasing an entire faction at the moment. They also have mechs, and I have things to say either way. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the high-grade Universal Century Gundam RX-78-2 Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at my favorite Gundam and its questionable variant, the Metal Robot Damashi Huckabane and Huckabane 30. Huckabane is a frequent attendee of a little series called Super Robot Wars, which is a turn-based tactical RPG that started 30 years ago, with a basic premise of, you like robots? Well, here's a lot of them in the same place interacting with each other. We don't need to talk about that. It's basically a fan service series for robot nerds that I find to be rather novel. The newest entry is Super Robot Wars 30, which gets its name by having its roster consist 30% of Gundams. Thank you, Bandai. Surprisingly, it's also where this version of Huckabane originates. I'm gonna be honest with you, my Huckabane lore game ain't too strong. For all I know, Huckabane 30 is just the version of Huckabane that has delusions of grandeur and a really bizarre fashion sense, which is exactly what I'm gonna claim in the next segment. So let's look at the box. These are on, whatever, I don't... My favorite thing about how Huckabane looks is that it's fucking blue. Dabba-dee, dabba-die. Not to say the sculptor didn't do a fantastic job here, because they absolutely did. I honestly really like how this looks. I also like the phallic cannon, but that's for later. Speaking of which, the later versions of Huckabane are, I guess, similar. Mark 2 and 3 have mostly the same head, whereas 30 probably has the most striking head design because it's... I know it stands for Xenogeneics Factorix Type. I think that name speaks for itself. Actually, just looking at these words gives me a fucking migraine. Generally, this design is just the Super Robot Wars V Huckabane with added details, which that one in turn is just a more defined version of the original Huckabane, except in the case of 30, they gave it like one of those New Year glasses and were like, yeah, this is a worthy celebration of our franchise. Or perhaps Kotoki is just in his cringe phase. Who knows? Like seriously. Justify it all you want. That doesn't make it not Chuny shit. I'm also going to be calling this one Fuckabane for the rest of the video because... you get it. So you can remove all of these, making them mostly identical to each other bearing the thrusters, which is why I borrowed Fuckabane and made this a joint review. By the way, this is the version you get from the limited edition of the game, so if you want it, what you probably have to pay includes the game at full price. The upgraded version of this is currently unreleased. Even though the price doesn't include the game, I didn't and won't get it. But with all this whack shit, it's called Huckabane 30. So guess what it's called after being upgraded? Huckabane 30th. Yeah, it's fucking stupid. It is identical, except you do get the Ken and don't get the funny X's. Well, you do, but it's the sealed version, which is really strange because that's like blindfolding someone wearing a VR set. And not only that, but it also fucking sucks, because you need to buy both versions to get any use out of it since you don't get the rest of the patches. Thank you, Paradox. The main addition of the version is this rather excessive backpack. Excess can be enjoyable, but I feel this might be a bit too busy for my taste. Don't even get me started. I didn't talk about the differing shades of blue because it's kind of been jumping between light and dark blue since its inception. I will say in this case, I do prefer the light blue, which might again be biased, but I don't know. What I do know is that, material-wise, I like the feel of these figures. Articulation is a bit tight in places, but not bad. Unlike the Knight Gundam I had, which was a bit more inconsistent, it seems like the Metal Robot Damashi line might have gotten better over the years. I still need to get that, Bill line. Anyway. They largely come with the same stuff. The only things that Fuckabane do come with that Hucka don't is a photon rifle and... I already brought this up earlier. It's all quite convenient, so aside from the conceptual and visual aspect, no complaints here. Hands are rather unremarkable, besides the recurring and perhaps misplaced disdain I feel for replacing tiny hands on tinier ball joints. I say misplaced because actually not a problem with this copy of Mihakbele. So maybe my bias against them is more targeted at poor execution. Fuck this shit, man. A while ago we talked about titty blasters. Now it's time for supermassive penis blaster. I mean that both ways. It's like how Psybuster has an attack where it does extreme pelvic thrust. Huckabane attacks by ejaculating, not just anything, fucking black holes. That's right. He subverts the concept of sucking cock by having his cock suck you. Remember when Star Wars movies were good? I actually haven't seen the last 2 movies, and I probably won't. So this is why Go Nagai's signature is on the logo, since it can't be because of the featured series, since it's only fucking 2. Oh, I'm not mad at all. The Leap Slasher is a cool raw Sensurican if you're a fucking idiot. It's formed by combining 6 arc pieces mid-air, and attacks without requiring contact with its user. So you need to use the... stand. This is one of the differences the Metal Robot Damashi line has to the Robot Damashi line, apart from the metal part. Putting aside tradition, it probably inflates the price a bit, but it's a welcome addition. Speaking of, inflation. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. By the way, Huckabane is not a Gundam. Gundam is a topic for another day, but Huckabane is an original Super Robot from the first Super Robot Wars game, which was designed as a homage to Gundam, although a lot of people probably assume there's no deception when I said it's my favorite Gundam, because it really does just look like one. I also find it infinitely amusing that statistically, half of the Gundam fans watching this won't get far enough to hear me say this. Anyway, neither of these are bad, and I guess if you can accept the prices, I can recommend them. Although the Huckabane has gone rather pricey and hard to find, I might be somewhat at fault. 2 years ago, these were going for 7 to 9k yen on Mandarake, and I basically bought a few of them to locally sell for twice as much. Although, most things have kind of gone up and gone rare anyway. For the record, I only sold like 3. Either way. Hello, and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we'll be looking at the Flame Toys Furry Model Windblade. It is perhaps very fitting that this is my first Transformers review, although I'm gonna be honest, I don't know much about this character. I haven't gone through IDW, and right now, I don't feel like reading out her Transformers wiki page to give you the impression I know what I'm talking about. Because I don't. Based on my music choices, if you haven't caught on yet, I'm more intimate with the Japanese Transformers series. Which, considering this design, is a little bit ironic. Speaking of design, maybe Black Arachnia counts, but this probably isn't like how skimpy Skyrim can be considered canon if you look at the older games. I do, however, find it absolutely wild that this is an officially licensed Hasbro product. I am grateful, though. It's rather strange, but I actually remember the first time I saw these illustrations back in around 2015. At the time, I had never seen anything like this before, and for better or worse, it shaped the person I ended up becoming.
Shinitai.
Probably not. Regardless, Bon is an artist whose work I've enjoyed for the better half of a decade now, and yes, I do have one of their scale figures. In fact, I'm getting another one.
That's a penis.
We've done this joke already, go away. If you're familiar with Megami Device and similar Mecha Musume kits, this is not like that. Although if you consider it one, this might actually be the best Mecha Musume kit. The construction is actually pretty interesting, although I didn't really record any of it, so as long as you don't assemble it wrong, it's probably fine. And once it's assembled, I'm actually a bit surprised at how good this looks in person, although my surprise is probably due to how I thought it would look kind of shit. The promotional images didn't inspire much confidence, and even looking at it now, there's something a bit off about it, particularly the eyes. It might still be a sculpting issue, but I think the problem is the piece for the eyes includes parts that aren't the eyes themselves. Also, since it's a different color and material to the face, it throws off the shape of the eyes by looking like it's part of the eyes. I think this is the first time a 4i model had eyes like this. Interesting idea, but it's probably best to drop it moving forward. For the previous reason, but also because it doesn't look great in pictures. And while it does look quite nice in person because, wow, nice clear part, but that's only before you notice her eye detail, which is kind of cool, since it reflects a faint amount of light that's submerged by the clear plastic. But it also results in a soulless impression. Not like in the yandere way, because, I'm actually really into that. But more like just corpse eyes, lifelessly staring into the distance. Typically, Transformers not having light in their eyes means they're fucking dead.
Bumblebee, I'm fucking dead.
He's fucking dead.
Or it means your figure has LEDs or light piping. This has neither, and it's fucked. Speaking of things that are fucked, this is a model kit, which means you are limited by it having to be feasibly assembled by a person with the minimum requirement of a pair of nippers, which also limits the materials that can be used. It's probably why they had to use this fucking ugly bronze. But otherwise, I find the shapes here to be generally rather appealing. With mechanical detail doubling as anatomical detail, the balance between hard and robotic but also soft and charming shapes makes for a form that is fantastically realized. Except for this gap. In the fight between visuals and articulation, visuals kind of lost here, but considering this is a robot, it doesn't bother me as much as it would otherwise. However, it does mean the only poses that aren't hindered by this are ones like these. Which might not be a bad thing, but this gap is still bad. Generally, I think the stuff that doesn't quite work here is the result of design decisions rather than... Well, I guess I have to bring this up. Although I honestly don't quite understand the issue, I haven't really looked into it. Basically, there was a bit of controversy leading to the design being altered. Some people are very mad about this, which personally, the thing here I'm the most upset about is that, we get a fucking choice? Can I have a version of Revenge of the Fallen that's not disgusting and shit and ruined my fucking childhood? What I'm getting at is that I don't think the problems here stem from censorship, especially considering the altered concept is not that different, and the altered kit is probably even less different from the original prototype. The biggest difference here are these wings. The original is definitely a more interesting design that harkens back to traditional Japanese fashion, which is probably more fitting for the Geisha thing they got going here. I also fucking hate it. Whereas I have nothing against these. If we move downward, it appears the ass was changed. Her ass is still fat, but it seems like it used to be deeper.
It's so fucking deep.
Is the ass being deeper a good or bad thing? I am not an ass technician. I don't know. I do not understand the inner mechanics or the mathematical formulas in order to determine the appropriate depth of the ass in hand. I do think that this is probably a more practical ass, judging by its ability to maintain its shape despite the range of articulation it offers. So for me personally, this is the better ass. Because I don't know, this looks kind of wrong to me. Although that might just be because I fucking hate this pose. The only real bit of censorship is the crotch. I'm not too enamored by the addition of the trussy, aka Transformers pussy, on the original designs. It's nice, but I'm okay with their removal. I imagine most Transformers' default state is naked, except for maybe like Ultra Magnus. I'm not really sure what to take from this, actually. But it's not something I really need represented visually. I would be okay with it if it was an option, but having it be the default would be kind of weird. So I consider it preferable that this is the only option. It's not like options are at all much of a presence with this. We'll get to the very minimal accessories later, but this is it. This bland, expressionless expression. There are no faceplates for this, which is fucking mind-boggling. What makes it even more disappointing is that it's a very prominent feature of the Kurokara Curry line, even when it's entirely unnecessary. You can argue that including an Orion Pax face or a brain head is cool, but not having them would be absolutely fine, whereas only having one face here is honestly pretty frustrating. Even I have more than one face. I should probably summarize. I am unapologetically horny, but I also really like cool robots. And I think this does manage both despite also being a bit jank. Oh my god, is that a slightly different camera angle? Yes it is. I had to re-record this part because I forgot to put these on. Also, one of the lights is now purple because I didn't have the other ones. Anyway, let's fucking talk about articulation. I've always really liked the inclusion of a bend at the lower arm. It makes the more dynamic curved arm a choice that doesn't get in the way of articulation. On the other side of things, I get why the arm is like this, but also, what the fuck? I do find it rather unfortunate that a visually significant amount of the articulation breaks the sculpt. We talked about the legs already, and the articulation of the torso has pretty decent range, but is otherwise just odd. This might be because this is a model kit, or perhaps because the original version of the design didn't have this detail on the stomach, they tried to avoid putting a cut there. In a similar way, the new design might also allow for the waist articulation to be done how it's conventionally done, but I'm guessing they couldn't really change the initial prototype too much. Either way. With the Dark Advent kit, we witness a lack of restraint in the amount of accessories. Here, well, it's a very low bar, but I guess accessories are a little better than, say, a McFarlane figure. But I can't exactly call this open-handed. Although, I guess you do get open hands as your, only other option. Oh cool, a sword. Oh cool, another sword. I don't know what to talk about here. While we're at it, let's not talk about the stand, because there isn't one. This is the second time I've done this joke, but it's the only reason I bought the Sentinel stand, and I'm gonna get my money's worth. Not coming with a stand isn't really a bad thing, although it would be nice if it accommodated stands. For example, having the wing thing open up so I can stick a stand into it. Because having it claw around a figure makes it look bad next to other figures. It's also just visually intrusive. Aqua, Mazinger, Gurmagan, Shin. I think that ultimately, the end result here is quite attractive, but also pretty cool. It's a good mixture in my opinion, and down the line, if my reservations can be addressed, I would be able to easily recommend it to Bon enjoyers like myself. But as is, I guess I can recommend it if you like how it looks and don't mind the price. Otherwise, no. Hello, and hey. This is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the New Age H27D Death Knight David, which is a third-party Optimus Prime, specifically the sleep mode version. I mean, that's one way to say it. Another one would be, he's fucking dead. I like Transformers a lot, but I don't know why this is called David. Well, I know why they didn't just call it Optimus Prime. They don't have the license for that, which generally I try not to buy things of that sort. But Dead Optimus was funny enough to me that I had to get it. There is a problem though. Instead of being more than meets the eye, he's far away, in your eyes. If you've ever seen the 5-Star Stories movie, you'd know this joke is actually terrible and doesn't make any sense. Which is how I feel about this. It would be pretty weird to do epic action poses with Optimus's corpse, so we're going to switch between other variants of this figure for the B-roll. Which I guess just makes us a David review. Isn't David making a Star Wars game now? That's kind of odd, actually. I thought he didn't make games for If we're going to talk about how this looks, I probably need to get my biases out of the way. If you've seen my older reviews, which is something you really shouldn't do, I complain about how many Saber figures there are. The thing is, Saber fucking sucks. Whereas I like Optimus. That being said, Transformers toys are popular, and Optimus Prime is the most popular Transformer. Because of that, there is an atrocious amount of Optimus releases. As a result, I've long had a case of Optimus fatigue. It's to the point where even my friend is starting to feel it, although he's still intent on getting all these variants. What a fucking psycho. He's even getting what has to be my favorite version of Ultra Magnus. Piss, Ultra Magnus. The only David I own is Death Knight David. Wait a minute. My script says name all the Davids somehow, because Battle David is really funny. I'm not gonna do that, but Battle David is really funny. So why did I buy this? Well, the idea of a figure of dead Optimus is rather amusing to me, and the execution here is quite good. There have been several attempts at something like this, but by far, this is the best one. Actually, what the fuck? In more high-definition copies of the movie, I guess he appears brown? But why the fuck is he also still blue here? I don't know. And as for why this is the best one, unlike every other one of these, here he actually looks at least somewhat fucked up. They didn't sculpt in the damage, which is why these are just decals, but I do think they look pretty good. Which I would say about the paint, but it can chip with moderate ease, making it like a masterpiece figure. In fact, the idea here is to make this sort of a mini MP44, yet despite it being much smaller, it's not nearly as proportionally fucking ugly. As you can see from the 8 light, it has the fake and thick chest, yet the back is fine as opposed to absolutely atrocious. Although to be fair, this does have more pronounced gaps. But if we're still being fair, this is small. That being said, the fairness ends here, because the Magic Square one is better in pretty much every conceivable way. I guess this is still better than the MP44. I know the big meme about it was the price, but this was actually $330 if you pre-ordered it on Japanese sites. It was the retail price that was about $500. I don't know if they still do it, but Takara was doing this thing with Masterpiece releases where they made the retail prices a lot higher than the pre-order prices to troll Westerners. Which, since I don't buy them, is pretty fucking funny to me. If you want to laugh at me, I buy Sentinel products. I just want a good line barrel figure. Why are you doing this to me? Speaking of pain and sadness, look at this elbow articulation. 90 fucking degrees. Remember when I said I like a bend at the arm? You're misremembering. I said I like a bend at the lower arm. This is for the transformation, and it's really fucking annoying. You know what else is for the transformation? See this here? This looks silly, but it's actually not for the transformation. I don't know why or what the fuck this is here for.
Future Gokin here. So this actually isn't for the transformation. They did this to get more range out of the arms. It's awkward, annoying, and looks really weird, but I guess it's a solution. So if you don't think this is a problem, guess what? Because I kept getting sick while working on this video, new shit keeps happening. And this time for the comic book color version of David, New Age actually fixed this by giving it a double joint. Meaning, yes, that's what it was there for, and now it is gone. They say it's never too late, but they're like 13 recolors in. I guess you can expect proper joints on what's even left? Animation error, Optimus?
Either way. Remember that time Optimus died and pulled out a gun? Remember that time Optimus died and pulled out an axe? Remember that time Optimus died and... Much like action poses and the transformation, the inclusion of some of these accessories is pretty silly. Although unlike those, I have little sympathy for these. They could have just not included them and made this cheaper. I guess they're black now. Okay, well, the weapons I guess I get, but why is the Matrix darkened too? In the movie, he just gives it to Ultra Magnus and it's fine. Until they kill Orson Welles with it. This was in the other movie too, wasn't it? Except it turned to dust. Then it turned back. Okay, I have a question. In the Bayverse, is the Matrix of Leadership a Transformer? Wait a minute. Now that I think of it, couldn't the Allspark transform too? Is this it? Because it's Transformers, everything needs to transform? What do you transform into?
It's me again. So while I was working on this, there was actually a new Dead Optimus figure. It seems they put more work into the damage, which is pretty good. Well, I would say that if the cracks were just black like in the movie, I also don't care for these proportions.
I'm also realizing right now that, Optimus died in the Bayverse as well, didn't he? Although he came back to life. Don't you get it? Who else comes back to life? That's right. It's a Jesus metaphor. Holy shit. I think he even comes back after 3 days. We're just a cross away from pulling an Evangelion. Hideaki Anno loves referencing Ultraman. So much he made a movie that's just Ultraman references. We're really off track, aren't we?
It is I, yet again. Okay, obviously this whole bit was a joke. I haven't seen Revenge of the Fallen recently, so I don't actually know if they were going for Bible symbolism. I would like to think my audience doesn't need everything explained to them, so the real reason I'm bringing this up is just so I can talk about how this is something that writers or directors have a bad tendency of evoking. Because, oh yeah, the Bible, that's very clever. Thank you. I feel smarter already. This happens even in the Transformers series. For example, in Super God Master Force, there's a bit of a mangled allegory. The main protagonist's name is God, Jinrai, and the main antagonist's name is Devil, Z. It's just like the Bible. Well, God's D&D alignment doesn't tend to jump around. Remember that time God had 42 kids executed by bear for calling a guy bald? That's Old Testament, but still.
It seems like separating the transformation is the popular thing to do now, so you can find the transformation sequence in someone else's video. This is the truck mode. He's dead, so it's just a normal truck. I want you to think about that. Also, the doors can open.
That's amazing.
Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. This is an unlicensed product, so I'm not going to recommend it, but it's your money and you can do what you want with it. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we'll be looking at the Figma Bondrewd Gangway version, also called Ascending to the Morning Star version. But you know what? The sun rises too. Let's talk about Made in Abyss. It's basically a slice of life anime where naive dumbass kids go into a nightmare pit. Which is a pretty great contrast, and it works really well. Actually, if you live in Asia, you can watch all the episodes of Season 1 and the currently airing Season 2 for free here on YouTube. But if you don't, you can use a VPN. So did I just so happen to partner with a VPN to give you a great deal on a great service? No. So who is Bondrewd?
そういえばまだ名乗っていませんでしたね。私はボンドルド。アビスの探掘家。
Appearing mostly in the non-recap movie, he's a man of science and discovery, a man of logic and reason, who will take his conclusions all the way into hell. And back. Even though he's technically the antagonist for the movie, he turns out to be quite redeemable. No wonder he's called the, Bondrewd. Before I talk about how sick he looks, I want to talk about this box. So if you own a Figma, you're probably aware of what the boxes are like. They're fine, but not the most sturdy, regardless of how tenuous I feel it is, which I'll get to later. This is a DX Figma, which means it gets a DX box, making it double sturdy, and most importantly, much more stylish. Speaking of which, this motherfucker is a pretty stylish looking motherfucker. I really do find the look of this design in figure form to be just wonderful. I want to say it looks like he's got sort of a Victorian fit because, you know, I played Bloodborne. Wait, no I haven't. For the gain of PC...
should be left well alone.
For the gain of PC, cowards. That's a big lady. I don't know shit about fashion. I will say the helmet does kind of give me the vibes of like a Zeton suit if they were to add it to that one Ultraman manga. It's probably mostly because the vertical visor isn't an eye design that gets evoked all too often. As such, the only thing that comes to mind at the moment is Zeton, although it doesn't really have a tail. At least not usually. I think Hyper Zeton counts. Regardless, don't worry. He's not a furry. As currently depicted, he only has aspirations of such a notion. I love you, cock waffle. Gulp. Syrup. And honestly, this tail is cool. What, you don't like Godzilla? So earlier I called him a motherfucker because he's a daddy. And not just any daddy, he's best dad. If you're out of the loop, Ara Ara is for MILFs, Oya Oya is for DILFs, which begs the question, is he hot? Well, I don't know, I've never seen his face. Although he certainly does come off that way. Probably because he's voiced by Morikawa Toshiyuki, who also voices Kira Yoshikage. And like, Come on. To keep this video heterosexual, I'm going to put on latex gloves and start feeling this guy up. Articulation is actually a little better than usual. You get a double bend, which is atypical for a Figma, but there are things you wouldn't be able to do without this. And despite it being rather loose to the point of moderate inconvenience, it's a welcome addition. Either way. Alright, it's finally time to talk about this. So this figure comes in two versions, the regular version and the DX version. I won't get into too much detail, but basically they're actually different versions of Bondrewd. One of them has the backpack and the tail, and there are ones that don't. So in the DX version, you get the backpack and you get the tail. And in the regular version, you also get the backpack and the tail. Just looking at this announcement image, you could speculate that they want them to be more different, but the only difference ended up just being the heads. So yeah, in the DX version, you additionally get this head, which just kind of feels silly. It's not even that much of a difference in price. I guess not everyone is interested in figures with LEDs, which as you'd expect is powered by some nonsense mystical battery that I've never fucking heard of. This is called the gangway head. The usual problem that comes with the light only coming from a little LED isn't really a problem here, because yeah, that's how that looks. If you're wondering why I had it on for most of the video, it's because, at least according to my friend who recorded a lot of the footage, the paint for the eye on the regular head isn't as nice looking. That being said, there is a decent enough reason to have that one. For starters, it has a larger range of articulation, but more importantly, you're not going to have this on forever, because that's not how that works. I'm sorry to be the one who tells you this, but death comes for us all, even if you're a battery. That's actually a good segue for how you get these, which aren't really all that interesting. You'd be amazed by the kind of stuff you could fit into something like this, which I guess they aren't really batteries. It's a little more complicated, but they're basically packets that help him ascend from the abyss. That's why you can put them in his backpack. This can open and close, which I gotta neat it to you is pretty hand. I'm happy this one doesn't have the extra secure pegs. For figures that hold heavy stuff, I get it, but otherwise I find it needlessly inconvenient. You might say, I'm sorry Mr. Druid, but isn't that like a bit impractical? Well, you can't put them in the front since you can already shoot shit from these holes. What is there to not understand? It seems the usual Figma stand is kinda letting itself go, which I guess is fitting since the figure is certainly bigger. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, it's alright. Yeah, no, that's how I'm ending this. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the Sentinel, Penny Parker, and Spider, or however you pronounce that. The predicament I found myself in deciding to review this is that I don't need to tell you about Spider-Verse, we all know it's really good. If you don't, well you're stupid, I don't have to deal with you. The second rather similar issue is that the figure itself is not particularly noteworthy. Is it good? Not really. Is it bad? Not really. Look at my notes. They're fucking empty, because I'm a sane person who doesn't write things down in random pieces of paper that are for some reason on my floor. Anyway, this box is kinda shit. Let's talk about how this looks. In the original version, Penny Parker was an Ava pilot, or what I assume was the original version. I don't fucking read comic books anymore. Kinda like how Baymax originally was fucking Green Satan. If you want the other version, Sentinel's sister company, Flame Toys, is making that one. The fuck's a Tech Kaiser? Anyway, this looks pretty nice. However, it is rather stupid and annoying and shit that you have to attach these decals yourself, because I can't be fucked. It's also fucked that Penny's just a little statue. Like, I get it, except I don't. The only time it kinda made sense was with Musashi and Benkei. Like, just stop doing this. For the love of all that's unholy, fucking stop. This is cringe. You're being cringe, Sentinel. And I say that surprisingly lightly. I guess this looks pretty good, even if it's kind of odd in certain angles and in certain light conditions. But that's fairly common with anime figures. There is another problem, though. The articulation here leaves no impression, because there isn't any. But on the actually articulated one, the only impression it leaves on me is that these feel like they'd break easily. Not that they have, but still. Anyway. Yeah, that's it. You do get some features, though. You can turn it into this, which I honestly really don't want to have to do. And as you may have noticed, this has an LED which fortunately uses LR44 batteries, and even came with LR44 batteries. That's nice. Not big nice, though, because this figure is merely moderately sized. Aqua, Mazinger, Gurren Shin. Overall, need I repeat myself? Need I repeat? Probably not, so yeah, that's it.
Oh, this is Mini Gokin Reviews. Okay, we're not doing that. Hey, this is Mini Gokin Reviews. What is Mini Gokin Reviews? Why is Mini Gokin Reviews? Basically, this is the show I'm doing because I don't have all the time in the world. Just because I'm a vampire doesn't mean I don't have shit to do. It sucks, I know. I wish I could die, but I can't. What is a Mini Gokin review? It's like the usual reviews, but not necessarily shorter, but rather less time spent in the making. Also, I'm a bean. I have a lot of footage just laying around taking up disk space. It's probably a good idea to do something with it. Anyway, this is the Arctech Lucia Dawn. I got this mostly because I was interested in the Arctech line, and she cute. Arctech is a line by Apex that mostly just make characters from Chinese phone games for weebs. Although apparently they want to make a Rem figure, how fucking surprising. This character is from Punishing Grey Raven, which is a Chinese phone game for weebs that I know pretty much nothing about. It's like Honkai Impact, but I don't know, I played that game like 5 years ago and it's still only in Chinese. I'm mostly interested in how this looks. This design is What If Miku Would Step on My Dick? Also known as regular Miku, so I guess not that. It's like Demon Samurai Cyber Miku or something. This is the version of Lucia Dawn with the most knickknacks. I assume it's like Servant Evolutions and FGO. I assume because I don't know how that works either. My friend described this line as articulated scale figures, which is fairly probably accurate. Just look at the paint on her dress. And instead of being Figma size, this is scaled like a scale figure. It's not even 1/6, it's 1/8. Which is a little bit annoying, but I guess it's fine. Something I do take issue with is, when characters have longer proportions, if in your adaptation you don't apply that to all the relevant features, the proportions just won't really work. Regular anime face, thin, long-ass body. It's not really a problem here because I think this is just how she looks in the game. And she's not that lanky Kong to begin with, so why am I even complaining about this? Well, I'm not getting the Figma Ichi just for one complaint, so I'm doing it here. And you can't complain back at me because you could have just left. Actually, the first Arctech figure had some proportion issues, in that they were wrong. Maybe you like this better, but it's noticeably incorrect. Probably not the case here. An actual complaint I have is how this is cut to make room for articulation, particularly the chest. This gap is so big and the connected part is pretty rounded out that any angle that's not directly in front is fucking weird. I get it's for the articulation, but also that looks kinda fucking terrible, so what's even the point? Otherwise, the articulation is pretty good. You get I'm sick of your shit, I'm fucking tired of your shit, and a yelling face that's kinda bland. They don't even use it at all in the promotional images. You get hands. Yes, she comes with thighs, and you know what? So do I. This is indeed rather hot, but it needs to be acknowledged that this is also very hot.
I'd fuck a robot.
You can attach them to her arms because, sure, why not? Apparently, this comes with a code to unlock one of these swords in-game, but only the Chinese one, so that's great. You get these, I don't know what they are, and because they float, you have to attach them to the stand, which doesn't slot in her ass or something because there's no hole. So having the stand serve as storage is a good idea. What's not a good idea is making that stand clear. Just make it fucking black or something. Otherwise, she's standing over a pile of her disembodied faces and thighs. Big, weird, very sizably weird. Guts, Mozinger, Ludens. Overall, I guess I can recommend it if you like how it looks and don't mind the price. Otherwise, no. That's about it. Hey and welcome. This is Mini Gokin Reviews, although perhaps that name's a little misleading. I'm more Gokin than you'll ever be. As the name would imply, you are watching a review. And the review for this time, what could it be? It's a wasp girl. The Snail Shell Wasp Girl B. Except not that, although it might as well also be that, since this is just a recolor of it. This one is named Bunchan and the other is Ruririn. But saying Ruririn's my fucking mood, so I guess I'm gonna call her Argade Girl. Which, we'll get back to. This is the second Snail Shell review I'm doing. There might be more of these if I can afford it, but yeah, these are cool, for the most part. The box for the Argade Girl is bigger because the stand is actually properly packaged. However, if you order the Ami Ami exclusive version, you can assemble a new box for the Wasp Girl that is the same size. Because, look! It's the look segment. And she looks kinda bug, but also kinda snack. The Wasp Girl was designed by Mogumo. They have an absolutely adorable art style, which is kind of a problem, since the figure doesn't really inherit that. It's still a cool design, but Mogumo's art style isn't quite captured. To be fair, it's probably really hard to nail an art style with something like this, considering you have to make room for eye articulation. And I have no idea what illustrations they had to work with, or whether you even can capture their style in figure form. On its own merits, the actual design of the figure is still quite nice. I very much enjoy the honeycomb wasp hive pattern tights. Okay, I'm sorry, this bugs me. But I guess we can just sort of assume this is loosely wasp and bee themed, because they have stingers and are a similar color. Argade Girl is a recolor of Wasp Girl. So, why the fuck is this purple? Okay, so an Argade is in the same order as wasps, hymen, Optera, and I guess are probably technically wasps. But, they don't have a stinger, and they're not fucking purple. So then, why is this called Argade Girl? Okay, I'm going to explain this in the least complicated way possible. The one thing that's absolutely clear to me is that I don't have any goddamn clue why this is Argade Girl, so let's just talk about her fucking hair. This is another case where the adaptational differences to the illustration kind of bother me. Like, you're making her purple and giving her a scythe. I want her to look like a crazy bitch. And at least the illustration on the box has wavy hair, but instead, her hair looks like she should be bringing around a katana or something. Like, I want a Daizengar. Premium Bandai. You know what? Fuck you too, Bandai. But I also don't really care for samurai shit, and that's the vibe her hair gives me. Although, this might just be me trying to rationalize why I don't care for this hair. I guess it just looks weird to me. And in concept, considering my interest, I feel like I should like this more, and I just don't. Which is a shame, because articulation, or I guess general figure feel, is better here. The Argade Girl has joints that don't fucking slide off way too easily, unlike the Wasp Girl. I'm pretty sure someone who bought this is going to comment about how their copy of the figure has this problem. Quality control is a cruel bitch, and I don't know what else to tell you, so I'll just... The box art makes it look like she should be sort of a silent sociopath. She even has slit pupils like a fucking snake, and yet this is what her faces are like. There is an amount of gap moe to it, in theory, but in practice, honestly, these are kind of plain. Oh boy, what do I have to say about the fact she has hands? Very cool pun. Both of them come with this. It's also named the same. So yes, the Argade girl, which is designed after a wasp, gets a bee shield. The green one, released separately for Phantom, is also called this. For Wasp Girl, this is just a spear, but for Argade Girl, it can be a spear, or it can be a scythe that's more like a jank-ass pike, or it can be a crossbow. Is this why her name is Ruririn? Did they think of the names Ruri, Riri, and Rin and were like, how about just all of them? Stand. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, I like the original version more, but this one is better in certain aspects. So I guess I can recommend it if you like how it looks and don't mind the price. Otherwise, no. I don't know if it's true since I actually haven't seen Black Sun, but my friend kept complaining about how much they use the theme, so this one's for him. I actually met Tetsuo Kurata, as in I just stood there while my friend asked for a photo. We didn't get a photo.
Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews. And judgment is worthless. Today we're gonna look at the thing that I'm gonna talk about, which is this thing. The Figma Mona Magistus Mirror Reflection of Doom version. There's this comment I get a lot in these videos that I've never really reacted to because I never had a reaction to it, but yes, Figma does indeed sound like Ligma. So go ahead and leave your Figma balls comments. Also like and subscribe. Monus, Father of the Abyss, is a character from Resident Evil 3rd Impact, a modern take on the classic 1925 German gaming experience, Minecraft. What, you expect me to actually tell you what Genshin Impact is? Fine. It's a Lego game. No, seriously. You swap between characters for puzzles, who mostly share from a pool of movesets, with combos consisting of only a couple of attacks. I guess it's also like that one Nintendo game. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Democracy. I actually played Genshin for 1 or 2 weeks when it came out. I was fairly impressed with what the game had to offer considering it's an anime phone game, but I stopped playing because I didn't like how all meaningful progression was tied to a horrible gacha system and timed resources, all of which you can pay to get more of. Not that that's remarkable. And boy, did I dodge a fucking bullet. Because little did I know that the game would become incredibly popular, which does tend to have the result you'd expect. Okay, look. Now the figure. We're gonna talk about that now. After I put this hat on, which unlike previous endeavors, does actually work really well, at the cost of being somewhat mandatory if you want to avoid displaying her with a hole in her head. You don't want that now, do you? And she looks exorbitantly fancy, which runs counter to the one detail I happen to know about her due to its prominence in the various fan materials, i.e. she's fiscally challenged, which is a little bit strange to say because also, yeah, I can tell. Look at her broke ass, girl can't even afford pants. Although that's probably for the best. I never want to see her wear pants. Ever again. Jokes aside, or maybe we're still joking, or maybe I'm entirely serious, I don't know. But out of all the characters in the game, her outfit is probably the most lewd, which I respect. She's got a bunny witch-ass outfit, or as I like to call it, a bitch-ass outfit. And it's recreated in figure form in a way that's very appealing. All of the important details are present, and none of it is poorly painted. As for the design itself, I like it. The theming is pretty on the nose, I mean, just look at this. I doubt you'd be surprised if I told you she's an astrologist. However, it doesn't take away from what's most important. She cute. Her face roll may be less sharply defined than the scale figure, I personally find more charming, especially with how expressive the options are. I can feel the financial strife. Not that I needed help to. If I had to complain about something, I'd complain about Robert and how he owes me $300. Where's my money, Robert?
I know you're watching this.
But if we're talking about the figure, it's probably the seam, like, Otherwise, I find the way the sculpt is segmented to be perfectly acceptable. The separation does make the chest part of her outfit look like it's not part of the outfit, which you might find odd. Counterpoint, I think it's kinda hot. Although if you aren't partial to the compromises from articulation in general, this isn't going to change your mind. Speaking of articulation...
Future Gokin here. I want to discuss something real quick, and that something is ass. In my review of the hentai action Erika Kuromoto, I criticize the segmentation of the ass, and make the suggestion that designing it like the Figma Aqua would be more ideal. Possibly due to that video, I occasionally get comments from people who seem to have that opinion about all articulated figure asses. In my defense, I was right. The conditions required to achieve that sort of design were met with that figure, but those conditions have not been met here. In fact, this is an example of a figure where that would be a bad idea. If you want to design this in a way where the ass cheeks are part of the leg, because of the outfit design, you'd need to make a really intrusive cut, whereas on Erika and Aqua, that cut was covered by a skirt. And say you're okay with this cut. If you want the ass to be fully intact, even if you were to make some kind of fancy joint, you would still be confronted with the problem that asses are not static. The shape will change with leg movement, and this is why they're typically designed like this. With this design, we're creating the illusion of a dynamic ass, when in reality, it's simply that more of this is revealed when parts of it are concealed. And the cut, while not exactly ideal, has better continuity than the alternative. This looks fucking weird. Anyway, there's another way to handle this design problem. However, I don't have time for that now. Maybe I'll make a dedicated video about this subject, but for now, let's get back to whatever the fuck Zerogokin was talking about.
This is a lighter, by the way. It's like, there's no fluid in here, but you can like fill it up. This is actually very solid. I have nothing to complain about. Unlike the last Figma I reviewed, I guess it's hard to keep yourself together and be a great dad. Anyway. Hands are indeed a thing she has. Who would have guessed? Most notably, she comes with a hand holding a purse that appears to be empty, which she can't be happy about. Literally. She is incapable of smiling, because her rights to smile are monopolized by the Good Smile Company. It was made a Good Smile online shop exclusive to entice you to get the figure through means that they don't have to pay retailer fees for. Whilst understandable in intent, when something like this is made limited, instead of it being a thank you for buying it from their store, it's a fuck you to everyone else. Why not just make this limited? What the fuck even is this?
Mona creates a phantom of fate from coalesced water.
Oh, it's an attack she can do. I don't know. Again, I didn't get her when I played. All I know, she has a book. At least I assume she would, because she does look like the type to line up for book. Although, if you don't play the game, it's really disappointing to find out there's like 5 weapon types that every character pulls from. Oh man, what kind of weapon does Hu Tao use? A spear, like 10 other characters. You're not special. You never were. The book is actually pretty cool. Unlike the one owed by my femboy friend over here, you can close it. Heck, this would be legible if, you know, it wasn't fucking nonsense. Speaking of things I don't And... funny hexagon. You can stick your little rod into her from behind. You can also prop her up academically. Same deal with this magic circle thing that I don't care to talk about. Additionally, you can place her next to other figures to see how tall she is in comparison. Or at least, I'll do that. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, it looks good and is a very solid Figma. At least a copy I received. I don't fucking care what your copy is like. So what's there to not like? Alright. To be fair, it's probably still a better deal than actually spending our money in Genshin Impact. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we are observing, analyzing, criticizing, and most importantly, stumbling into nonsensical tangents about the snail shell tappy gal milk tea girl. Based on illustrations by Dog Driver, developed and manufactured by Snail Shell, who are, yet again, getting a feature on this show. Are they gonna get more? Well, this is their second swimsuit figure. I have not talked about this one. And I won't. So she'll just be around sometimes, and you'll just have to accept that. However, this was open for pre-order and released around the same time as a different Snail Shell figure. So look forward for something else. I'll just give the rundown right now. These were designed by the Bird Binary guy, which isn't a problem. The guy's made some really cool stuff. The problem is, these just don't leave much of an impression on me. As a figure, the joints are fine, but the material is noticeably worse than their typical output. And there are design elements that I quite like, but there are also ones that I really don't. So it evens out, afflicting apathy upon my mind. And no, this isn't just about the furry shit. I can accept that as these just being Man with a Mission members. We are going to talk about this figure, because that's what the video is about. Who would have guessed? I might be being culturally insensitive here, but I'm going to assume she's a gyaru. I'm not a fashion expert, so the following bit of exposition may be inaccurate. Gyaru is a fashion subculture. It's also what you'd call a person partaking in said subculture, as the word is a transliteration of the English slang word gal. For the sake of my mental welfare, I also will be referring to as gal instead of gyaru from now on. And no, in this context, the male version of a gal is not a guy, it's a gal-o or gyaruo. The gal subculture began in 1970s Japan as a rejection to traditional Japanese beauty standards and expectations, which I'm all for. Fuck expectations. Not everyone wants to be Yamato Nadeshiko. All things considered, it's probably an extremely safe bet to assume she's a gal. She is named Tappy Gal, although for some reason that name is not present on the figure box and manual unless you got the Ami Ami version, which you probably did, but I did not. Also, she looks like this. Tan skin, blonde hair, classic gal traits. Not to mention this outfit. Do you understand? It's a very flashy outfit that is neither modest nor particularly conformist. Also, classic gal traits. Maybe not modern gal traits on that last bit. Culture is pretty fluid. I know it's been weird, but you can blame my gal hesitance here on Raita. She's not a gal, she's just half Brazilian. But whether or not she's a gal, she looks great. The design feels thematically interesting, or at least unconventional. How often do you see fashionably armed cyberpunk gal? In figure form, no less. No, seriously, I have no idea. The translation from illustration to figure is questionable. Not as in it's bad, but rather as in, I have a question, and that question is... what? These are all I have, and none of them are conclusive enough to give me much to discuss. I do like that she isn't covered in barcodes and QR codes, and changing the hair from white to blonde is also a fine alteration if gal is the desired outcome. That's it. Sculptwork is more defined than usual, probably because she actually has more to define. If there wasn't artwork on the box, the cyber details could help sell the articulation cuts as part of the design, especially considering some of Dog Driver's other illustrations. But not everything can get a pass. Before I barrage you with pedantic criticism that sounds a lot more negative than it actually is, I want to stress that again, I think she looks really good. There just are some cracks. Now that that's out of the way, there are some uncouth things I could say, and I will say them. Unga bunga, awooga awooga, hamana hamana, damn girl, that's a tight-ass G-string. We get some camel action like we're in a To Love Ru manga page. So I know it's Toraburu, but much like Cybaster, I choose to pronounce it incorrectly. Foreshadowing. Yeah, I don't like this detail. Bit out of left field considering the same kind of definition does not extend to other areas for visual cohesion. Moreover, the opposite seems to be true for the illustrations. Granted, I am not particularly knowledgeable about the adherence of garments. That being said, this slight curve modestly bothers me. It also bothers me that I thought she had the weird robot toes gamer girl feet like Raiden from Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. Although Raiden from Metal Gear Rising Revengeance's weird robot toes gamer girl feet have high heels. He really do be Metal Gear Rising. She may or may not have.
I want to rephrase this tangent. So the problem I have here is the way these are sculpted doesn't really make sense. The folds indicate this is a garment and not robot legs, but the toes are clearly distinguishable, which is not how socks look, unless they're toe socks, which are disgusting, and would not have a consistent fold going through the toes as there is no such continuity between them. So from a logical and artistic standpoint, I take issue with the scope work here. Furthermore, I take full offense of the flagrant fetishization on display, and I condemn this immoral depiction. Not on the basis of fact, but on the basis of contempt. Or whatever. Back to the other guy.
It's weird I'm spending so much time talking about feet. I'm more well known for having tangents on posterior elements, like this one. Her ass is indeed fat, but her ass is also badass, as in it's bad. In figure form, the fatness of her ass and this outfit creates some rather vexing details. The undershell of the ass is visible on almost every front-facing pose on the box, because even when trying to show the figure at its best for promotional purposes, such a detail is unavoidable. What I'm saying is the continuity of the ass is kinda ass. I mean that in a bad way. However, deeper discussion is asinine. As I discussed last time, this type of outfit design isn't conducive for creating aspirational asses in conjunction with articulation, which in this case for a snail shell release, articulation is surprisingly limited. If it weren't for the double joints, it would be Figma tier, which isn't necessarily bad, mind you. Eye articulation is a usual standout with these, although if you're fussy about accurate eye placement, the eyes can be pretty frustrating. Not a criticism, it's just the result of having such a feature. I guess the shoulder design also has more range on the Z-axis. Is it interesting? Yeah. Is its range more accurate? Yeah. Do I like it? Like, aside from praising the sun, what pose do I need this for? Especially since there's not a lot you can do considering her chest articulation is bust-ed because she's bust-E. The range is pretty minimal, but the trade-off is that the continuity, while not seamless, doesn't feel intrusive. Unlike the Artec Lucia, which had a lot of range, but was very intrusive and fucking weird. A way to deal with this, and I think something that this does lack, is extending parts. On a Figma, you can pull out the shoulder joint for more range, or push it in for less intrusive joints, which is a feature I moderately wish this had, with not just the shoulders, but other parts as well. On the other hand, with the size we're dealing with here, this is possibly the best you can get. Anyway. Her face is great. Her other face is also great. They're not overly expressive, but not every figure needs to include a wacky yelling face. When I first saw the prototypes for this, I was over the moon about the face, which is kind of a problem. For me, not the figure. In the prototype, she looks like she'd heat-seek my dick and annihilate it over international waters. Now she, doesn't look like she'd do that. which is a shame. Not that it's bad. If anything, what they went with is better suiting, but I have my preferences. I hope they make another version of this, with this face in the Player 2 colors. Call it milk. Let's talk about the hands. Aside from the open ones, you get 2 pairs of holding hands, one to hold things this doesn't come with, and the other to hold... These are model kits that are somewhat similar to Little Armory kits. Building these is rather unpleasant due to the plastic being quite hard and the parts being very small. You're gonna want to use some glue and at least 2 decals as well. But visually, they've taken the idea of futuristic guns that fire bubble tea deadly serious, and it fucking rules. These look better than any gun I've seen in Cyberpunk 2077, and I mean it. Because I haven't played it, but I can't imagine them being any better than this. Really stellar stuff here, even if I'm not sure what they're for. I have a question. The box calls this health operation. What does that mean? I wouldn't associate bubble tea with health, as it's not very good for you. Or is that the point? Is it an operation to disrupt health, like some kind of caloric missile? Foreshadowing. I have no idea, and I've definitely had one of those bobas in my lungs. Oh wait, no, those are called alveolus. That being said, this isn't where my brain initially went, because in Japan, there's this thing called delivery health, which is essentially Amazon, but it's for your dick. Does that make sense? It's some kind of probably online prostitution service. My knowledge of this comes entirely from pornography, which isn't really a reliable representation of reality. However, it would explain the womb barcode. Although I probably shouldn't make assumptions. So anyway, it says Health Operation number 1. So hopefully this is the dawn of a new line, because I'd like to see more. There are some pretty neat guns by Dog Driver. She has unholy feet, because maybe you don't want to use the stand. Why? Well, it sucks. To be fair, it's not their fault, because it kind of always does. Unless we get some kind of scale figure tier stand, it's gonna be this unstable pain in the ass. Otherwise, visually, I think it looks kind of neat. Much less intrusive than the usual black circle shit. But like, man, dude, bro, buddy, put a hole in her back. Like, she's already got some, but one that I can stick a proper stand into would be Gooderino, because claw stands are uggo. Speaking of a lack of features, if you own the robot build Seawolf, you can attach it to her like an exosuit, but I do not. And to be quite frank, I would not. It looks substantially wacky in a bad way, except the dog. I like the dog. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Over.
Future Gokin here. Hey, you stupid little bitch. It's time for Gok Impressions. Really living up to being a stupid little bitch, aren't you? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's my, or our, as the Gokin Collective's Impressions, hosted by yours truly, Future Gokin. Someone suggested I put these in videos, which is not a bad idea considering not a single living human being would click on a video about Cybuster's disc cutter. I can hear the wind calling me. Cybuster is a cool-ass Super Robot Wars original that has glorious Dubin vibes, but is obviously distinct and is just great. Aside from the one detail that, despite everyone assuming it's called Cybuster, because that sounds like something you'd actually name something, it's officially Cybaster. And you know what? The Cybastard who decided that can fuck right off. I refuse to call it that. Anyway, this is the blade wielded by Cybuster, the disc cutter, or said by Masaki Ando himself. It was made by Amakuni, who also made a Super Robot Wars Gal figure I wanted to get, but decided against since it didn't look sufficiently chonky. Now we're talking. This is made for the Shin Uchi line at 1/20th scale, presumably so you can pretend to be a robot. Despite how the other version looks, I'm not a prop guy. This is the one other prop I own, so I don't know a whole lot about stuff like this. Is it well priced? Are the features good? I have no idea. Visually, it does look like a sword from a figure that was just scaled up, which I prefer over it being a disgusting chrome. Although there are some concessions made, presumably for features. The blade, however, looks deceptively simplistic. I find it very appealing that despite looking just like a figure sword, turning on the light reveals the fancy runes, which don't look how they're supposed to. Nonetheless, it's visually very cool. I'm not particularly familiar with all of Psybuster's material, but the sword probably doesn't actually light up like this. It's more of a representation of the prana energy enveloping the blade. The sword light can also become red, which I don't remember that ever being a thing, but I won't question it. Aside from lighting up, you also get the features you'd expect, like all kind of lines from the games, consisting of his moves and some extras. Additionally, you get funny sword sounds if you move the sword certain ways. Of course, you can't have something like this without a theme button. This is the limited version. So magic circle for you. Which stabbing this beneath him is the first step in delivering a devastating pelvic thrust, the Akashic Buster. It can also be done from the front, which is less cool, but I can do it without showing you my feet. Those are my relatively brief Gok impressions. Make of it what you will.
Fun fact about tapioca milk tea, it's used by artists to make scat fetish art without the shit. Overall, for an articulated figure of an original design, it's pretty good. Its price is similar to an SH Figure Arts, although prices for those are all over the place for reasons I don't understand. So I can recommend it if you like how it looked and don't mind the price. Otherwise, you know what to do. Like and subscribe. Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we are looking at something that's not just pure evil. No, it's much worse. It's double evil. Because today we are looking at the hobby toys. Wait, no. Fans toys. That's also not it. Fans hobby. There you go. Double evil. Which is a third-party version of one of my favorite Transformers, Overlord. Whilst originating from the 1988 Transformers Master Force series, the Big Blue Boy has made a resurgence in modern Transformers media. But I don't know shit about that, and to be honest, neither do I care to. Not after what they did to Star Saber, and this looks like dog shit. At least Robot Masters was, like, really stupid in a fun way.
何をするリバースコンボイコンボイだと違うな真の名は暗黒の魔王リバースメガトロントランスフォーム
In Super God Master Force, Overlord is sort of our main antagonist, but not really the Decepticon leader because the actual leader is too ballsy of a bastard. He's so bad, he's got his own theme about how he's bad, bad, bad. Guys, he's a ball. Why did you bother? To be fair, this song rules. Also, he later possesses Black Zarok, making him not voiced by Banjo Ginga. Which I took personally. Overlord is the primary opposition to our main guy, Jin, not Optimus, Rai. I find it a bit strange that this guy is the evil one, despite Jinrai being the one with the white van full of children. It's no wonder one of the Jinrai toys you could buy was a pair of handcuffs. Ho ho, you get 2 boxes, ooh. My affection for this character is entirely superficial and vibes-based. You could say that about my opinion of Transformers in general. In his 1992 book, Gary Chapman coins the theory of love languages, which is essentially the idea that people have differing ways of expressing and experiencing love, in a way that can be understood as a form of language. The 5 languages he proposes are words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. But my love language is cool robots, and boy, is Overlord a cool-ass robot. Look at him! For some reason it took me a while to figure this out, but I think the reason I love Overlord might be because the design gives me Raoul vibes. Wow, Zerogokin brings up Fist of the North Star, something he never does. Overlord, much like Raoul, is a muscular chonkster who's stoic and imposing. While not the largest guy out there, he towers over those directly opposing him. However, unlike my boy, this figure is doing the opposite of neck-maxing, an unstimulating lack of necking, practically non-existent, which is, I guess, accurate, and is a shame, because we here at the Gokin program stan a king who is necked to the teeth. If that doesn't make sense, this won't either. Visually, I'd say this figure is double evil, but half good. To help you understand, let me put this into a simple list. Things I like. Things I don't like. The upper half of this is quite good. The lower half looks like ass, but not in the good way. Okay, it's not that bad, but what is this shit? His thighs must have run off to the fucking Bumblebee movie. Forget legs for days. Guys' thighs be just living in the moment. Thighs aside, lower legs aren't particularly objectionable, kibble is minimal, presence is great. Criticizing the negative space here would be petty. A real criticism comes from how these feet make me cringe. Not only do they look weird, but they're rather unstable. There's just not a lot of relative contact area for such a sizable lab. Upper half though, fucking great. Aside from the neck. And the back kibble is not perfect, but I can't say I find it particularly egregious, especially considering he originally rocked a fucking airplane runway, unironically. I guess he still does, but it's mostly a storage thing. These are also minorly distracting, but unlike Jinrai being minorly attracted, it's not really noteworthy. The face is great. Probably the best figure representation of him. Look at those delicious but imposing lips. He really is a Fist of the North Star character. Overlord originally had his nipples just hanging out in the open. I don't know which iteration these came from, but I do like the inclusion of some white titties for me to slap around. Although, I don't mind the look of these opened and would have appreciated if they were removable. I probably should have brought this up earlier. I absolutely love the colors of Overlord. The dark blue is imposing, the white is surgical, the purple is menacing. And this figure portrays them very fucking well. Further facilitated by the fact, articulation is quite good, as a masterpiece class ideally should be. Being a rather large one, there are a lot of ratchet joints. The leg bend does, however, exacerbate the disparity between the thighs and the rest of the leg. Otherwise, downsides are mostly design limitations, as you can see for yourself. This gun is fun, or I guess more accurately, very satisfying. Yeah, that's it. But wait! there's more. Unfortunately for me, the person who sold this bundled it with the add-on set, so let's talk about that. Replacing the faceplates is weirdly involved. And for what? These look like he has, like all of us, autism, which I have to assume IDW Overlord does. He also treads carefully and carries a big gun. I don't hate it, I might even like it, but I'm good. It can also fire bullets, which I guess is neat. To complete the IDW look, you get these, which generally this isn't bad. However, I think he looks better with at least something on his chest to break things up, whether that be the Godmasters or the white panels. Speaking of which, once you've unearthed his inverted nipples, if you give them a firm press, you'll stimulate him into further revealing himself, and these abs are to die for. His nipples are Mega and Giga. Giga is the male-presenting nipple, and Mega is the female-presenting nipple. Put in more visually descriptive terms, Mega is a sexy witch mommy, and Giga is Lu Bu. Honestly, this might be a bit racist, but they look like Dynasty Warriors characters if they bothered to stop drawing at some point. It's like, what the fuck is this, Omega Force? I also think that the post-Master Force non-Iacon mode thing is pretty cool looking, and in figure form, despite the Godmasters not being a well-thought-out gimmick to begin with, here they actually look proportional in enough of the right places. I think they look really good. Because the back is die-cast, they don't remain in place, which is fitting. Because according to the Super God Master Force showrunner, Mega and Giga are our Adam and Eve. And Devil Z is the snake that tempts them into disobeying the word of God and consuming the forbidden fruit, casting them out of the Garden of Eden. See? Look! Snake! I'll give you a hint, it's this right here. This would be a good time for an Adam and Eve sponsorship. Unfortunately, I heard they kinda suck, and not in the contextually appropriate way. Putting aside metaphysical metaphors, in the show, Mega and Giga are nice people, but they support bad things and have bad ambitions. Like my relatives, but cooler and more likable. My relatives also don't own military vehicles, as far as I know, but these two do. Let's talk about them, which of course involves talking about the transformation. My boy can become a jet and a tank, which are basically every modern Megatron alt mode. Shush. But unlike Blitzwing, he's both at the same time. Overlord is a combiner, but isn't like the others. Hashtag not like other girls. The parts don't become individual robots because Overlord is Overlord. I was kinda hoping that Mega Tank Commander accidentally fell onto a landmine because it'd be funny. Unfortunately, this is Giga Tank and Mega Jet, not the other way around. Giga Tank is a very appropriate name. It's the tank version of a Giga Chad, except I don't know how that makes sense, and I just think this is really nice. Worth the fucked up thighs and feet? No. Still, it's fucking cool. I do enjoy all the delicious little features this has. You can pull out a missile launcher.
It gets bigger when I pull.
You can even pull out the missile launcher missiles.
Top loads.
The treads can turn.
That turns me.
And you can place Giga in the cockpit.
Take it, boy!
Is this a functional tank design? I neither know nor do I care. The colors do distinguish it from a more realistic tank, which I think adds to its charm. But, you know how this is really sleek and cohesive? Yeah, you can ruin that. Mega Jet is the worst of the two, and by that I mean it's absolutely fine, probably pretty good even. Like, sure, you can see his tits from below, but holy shit, you actually get relatively normal looking landing gear. Mega can be placed in the Mega Jet. It's almost like it was made for her. Unless I missed it, something this should be able to do is combine with Giga Tank. A different way. I never took Giga as a bottom. I don't think you can double on with these, however, you can balance the chest panels on the side of Giga Tank for a pseudo double on. You shouldn't do this, but it is something you could do. Don't. While we're talking about transformations, he can also turn into a base. But there's a problem with that mode, as in, I really don't care about it. If you think that's unbased of me, you would be correct. Aqua Mazinger Shin. Over. Overall, this is an unlicensed product, therefore I will not recommend it. However, it is your money, and you can do what you want with it.
I want you to remember one thing. You're a boy in a man's world. And I'm a man who loves to play with boys. What the? No, wait a minute. Shut up. Hold on, no. Shut up, hold on a second.
Hello, and welcome to Zerogokin Reviews. And Halloween was last month? Well, I'm a vampire all year long, so go to hell. Anyway, today we're looking at the Trumpeter Soundwave. If you look up Trumpeter Soundwave, you might be presented with this image. I mean, it's a little bit funny, right? But first, do you want true wireless and crystal clear audio wherever you go? Well, too bad, they're both fucking dead.
Broadcast.
Actually, a fun fact, in Headmaster, Soundwave sounds like this. Soundwave's Soundwave sound like a fucking joke. It's a good thing that if you're jumping on Headmasters, he basically dies immediately. Not that you should watch Headmasters, also he comes back anyway. I haven't seen the original cartoon in Japanese, but in Scramble City, most Decepticons other than Soundwave have this flanger effect which sounds like complete ass. Can someone explain that to me? Soundwave does sound, I guess, better here. But nothing can top
Soundwave superior, Starscream inferior.
Wait, this isn't fucking Starscream. By the way, I'm still extremely pissed about that. You put an effort to make the characters actually look like their original counterpart, except Blitzwing, which looks like Starscream, and Starscream looks like fucking shit. Putting that aside, this is another Trumpeter kit. They're actually pretty complete at this point. Although surprisingly they're missing Optimus Berm. That is apparently coming though. Let's just get this out of the way. Does this transform? No. Oh no! Anyway, feel free to leave a comment about how deeply disappointed you are. Also like and subscribe. As I probably shouldn't need to explain, most officially licensed Transformers products that are not made by Hasbro or Takara aren't given the option to transform. I guess that's still better than Bandis. They don't give out the Gundis license much since they try to fill the market themselves, which at least they don't do an entirely shit job at that. Square Enix, you can't make figures. Please fuck off already. In all fairness, they kind of sort of did. Getting back to the original topic, this probably isn't politically correct, but I'm feeling a bit bold, so I'll say it anyway. I know it's called Transformers, but you're allowed to think Transformers are cool-looking robots, detached from their ability to transform. It's okay. Ooh, yeah, that feels fucking good. I'm feeling even more bold. You know what? Yeah. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say the N-word. Nippers. You don't need them. I know how much you like to play with your nips, but fingering is a perfectly satisfying way to reach a climatic outcome. And in this case, is more than socially acceptable even in public, as it's practically designed with that in mind. The fingering part, not the... You can do it in public, I don't think people give a shit. It works great, and nub marks are negligible. Not only that, but it looks really good. No stickers were used or even provided in the assembly of this kit. If you want to look like the promotional images, you might want to do some lining and weathering, but as is, the colors and materials are pretty nice looking. The sculpt also recreates the design in appropriate detail. There's a crispness to it that I feel like I almost never see. The design itself, not a fan. I like that I can actually tell what character this is, or even what this is, but what was wrong with the visor? Soundwave's visor is sick and I love it. Can we not just keep it like that? So I'm not normally someone who complains about thick thighs, but why are his thighs so fucking thick? Aside from my subjective lack of fondness for the design itself, I'm sort of struggling to find faults in this segment of the video. I guess it does come down to, these are legend scale, which is pretty small, and cost more than a high grade. To be fair, Bandus owns the Gundus IP, and these guys are working within the constraints of making officially licensed third-party products. Also, accessories are pretty minimal, which we'll get to later, but like, this is a kit of a character that showed up for that long. I showed you all of it. Heck, most of these characters only show up in a 3-minute segment within a 2-hour-long movie. Okay, before I blow my load early and talk about the accessories, let's talk about ejaculation. I mean, articulation. Range is pretty alright. How about feel? Personally, I'm feeling a bit aroused, which regarding Soundwave is not an unfamiliar feeling. This kit, however, actually feels more like a figure instead of a model kit, which is pretty great, especially when assembling it isn't complete fucking pain. Anyway, alright, I did say it makes sense that it comes with few accessories, considering the source material. However, he had a gun that he didn't even use, which I guess this isn't really relevant, but like, where did your gun go? He's pinned. Shoot him. Otherwise, having only open and closed hands is accurate, considering no gun. You also get a really weird dog, according to my friend, but it's actually a really weird cat. Ravage here doesn't transform, but does parts form. Here's how it works. You replace this part with this one. Alright, he's got a stand with his face on it. What a legend. Scale. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, you know what you want, and I'm not gonna make you submissive and give your balls a little spanking, unless that is what you want. Hello and welcome to Zerogokin Reviews. Today we'll be looking at the Figma Fluted Armor from the Demon's Souls remake. Before we begin, I need to inform you that this was sent to me for free by HobbyLink Japan. More on that later. Demon's Souls is a game that I have a lot of opinions about, and also haven't played. The only PlayStation I ever owned was a portable that some kid borrowed, but I have seen people play these games, and I gotta say, the remake has some incredible fidelity. Blue Point's got that tech on point. The original, on the other hand, looks fucking terrible. In the best way possible. There's something disturbingly oppressive and atmospheric about it that's missing in the Demon's Souls remake, or as I like to call it, Demon's Souls without the soul. Just compare the intros. Things go from bad to worse to
Oh, fuck. In the remake, things are manageable. But he gets back up and finishes the job. Then there's a dragon. This is actually really fitting for Dark Souls. But this is Demon Souls. From what I understand, when you get knocked down, shit has a tendency to get harder. I can honestly keep going, but we need to talk about how this looks. For some reason, when talking about medieval knight armor, a usually dormant part of my brain activates, and I start caring about historical accuracy and practicality. Hopefully I don't get too much wrong. In order to talk about this design, we must ask the question, what is a flute? Basically, it's a decorative thing where you add grooves to stuff. See this Roman column? That's a flute. So this armor is definitely fluted, but now we need to talk about fluted armor. Fluted armor, which I think is the same thing as Maximilian armor, is a 16th century German plate armor, characterized by the fluted detail on its plates. It was the fashion soles of real, as it was made to conform to the fashion of the time. It may have also increased protection, but at minimal it didn't hinder it. It certainly didn't come with the disadvantages of engravings. I will, however, defend this. The actual set in-game has, I think, etchings rather than engravings, which has a negligible effect on practicality, and the figure adapts these details by sculpting them, making it more visually appealing for this size. What I won't defend is these flutes. These look nothing like they do in actual fluted armor, and looked more believable on the original design. Okay, that's enough talk about flutes. If you want to hear me talk about glutes, tune in for a later review. I'm waiting on a part. However, a few more design complaints. The helmet on the original was definitely more funny looking, but actual fluted armor was funny looking. And while this is more realistic, the original is a lot more striking and interesting. I wish this came with the original helmet, which is in the game. But considering Bluepoint decided fuck the original art style and made the proportions more realistic, it might just look weird. The chest part of this is also kind of weird. It's less impractical than boob armor, but you might be surprised to hear that flat chest armor is also impractical. Generally, you want this dome shape for better impact protection. Alright, that's a lot of negativity. Do I like this? No. I like it a lot. Yes, I have complaints. Yes, I prefer the original, but this is by no means a bad design, and the presentation here is really appealing to me. Sculptwork is fantastic and shockingly crisp. Look at that. The silvery metal is really nice, however, the painting and finish doesn't really match the look of the game, but does remind me a lot of the look of armors in Dark Souls. Even this plain brown for the pants resemble the muddy textures of the older Souls games, which I grew up with the first Dark Souls game, so I absolutely love this. However, there is something that they got completely wrong. The neck here isn't exposed, which looks fucking terrible and is honestly the most egregious design failure in the remake version, so good shit, Max Factory. It's about time to talk about articulation, and this is a Figma. Yet somehow, the articulation here is some of the best I've seen on one, and even manages to be on par with recent Essex figure arts, which is great. Motherfucker needs to roll. The Figma line is getting pretty old, so it's gone through a lot of joint replacement. A lot of the joints that in older Figmas would just be Figma joints are now either ball joints, or double joints, or even double ball joints. And something I've always preferred about Figmas is the plastic tends to feel a lot more weighty and substantive compared to its contemporaries. This is no different, making it the best of both worlds. Joints also feel great to handle, but I'd be wary of differences in quality control. Not every copy will be like mine. If I had to complain, the shoulder articulation could be better. Having the pauldrons be on a double ball joint would have more range. But such a mechanism might take up space to the point it looks weird. Anyway. As previously mentioned, no head options despite existing in-game options. Of course, you get some hands, mostly to hold stuff like this. Finally, some good fucking food. I've had enough of this weeb trash. The Knight Sword is a bit more fantasy-pilled, but it's not bad at all. On the other hand, the large sword of Moonlight is mega fantasy-pilled and iconic. It's been a staple since Kingsfield, and I love it so fucking much. As a figure, it's about as good as it can be, without some crazy painting going on. I think they're already painting over a clear part. Check this shit out. For the last sword, large hammer, channel your inner Pyramid Head, cause it's meat cleaver time. Surprisingly, the figure can hold these swords really well. I wish there was a way to attach the big sword to his back, ideally with magnets, but arguably he shouldn't even be able to lift these to begin with. At least you can attach the shield to his back. First of all, this is what a kite shield actually looks like. This is more of a heater shield. Secondly, this looks pretty good, even if the metal rim is unnecessary and would just slow you down. Not to mention whatever this is. The weight of it would be completely unwieldy. If you ever got the impression that knights were really slow, you've been lied to. Regardless, this looks cool, so I forgive you. I gotta say though, stuff being too heavy is like whatever, but even if you're the chosen tarnished undead slayer hunter of demons, you still want your stuff to work properly. What's sort of a consistent, probably mistake in these Souls games is that this is not how you wield heater shields, or almost any other shield at that. With just one handle like this, shit will not stay in place. I will say though, holding it this way is cooler. So, forget everything I just said. Here, I'll help. This is an iron knuckle. As in an iron knuckle. Motherfucker's gonna straight you out, gay boy. So the good smell bonus is another one of these, which honestly is a pretty good way to do it. It's something I'd think it's cool to have two of, but not enough that its absence would make me feel anything. Speaking of not feeling things, stab. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, this is surprisingly pretty great. I was honestly expecting it to be a lot more mixed about this. Alright, I got this for free. I don't think my opinion would be that different if I did pay for it, but the price is definitely the biggest turnoff. Future Gokin here, and it's time for Gok Impressions. Today we're looking at Iron Factory's third-party drill horn, who is part of one of my favorite Transformers, Lio Kaiser from Transformers Victory. Iron Factory tends to focus on making robot modes that look and feel good, which is why the plastic they use feels great for handling the figure, but not great for the transformation. As a robot guy first, I'm happy with that. I'm more than happy with how well the robot mode was adapted. The look of this is pretty fantastic. Kind of a weird choice to make the one who looks like Rhino the smart one. But as designs, I've always liked the breast boys, even the ones who outside of fight scenes barely get any screen time. All the kibble here was present on the original and in some parts even made less pronounced. On top of that, they gave it more dynamic proportions, which is just lovely. Articulation is alright, not quite as good as MS Toys or in this case similar figures, despite the plastic feeling better to handle. The transformation is almost a shell former, and some people seem to have had problems with it, but I haven't. This mode though, kinda looks like bullshit. Surprisingly, he can turn into a really good leg. Usually triple changers look messy and have at least one fucked mode, but this is clean as all. Wait, what the fuck? That's kinda weird. But this is how this worked in Transformers Victory. For the Dino Force. Iron Factory, get on this shit. And you know what? If I'm getting this instead of this, stay mad, Transformers fans, I don't fucking care. Accessories are quite good. He's got two drills like the hand options you would expect and one you wouldn't. This is show accurate. To kill Bison, that's like his thing. Although I vaguely recall Drillhorn doing this once. Like all boob men, you get an electromagnetic nunchuck,
and a big-ass one. If you want to know what's the point of this, there aren't any yet. Lastly, and by all means mostly, you get his breast animal. This horny boy is named Hornbreast. Insert Magnus the Red joke. His breast is supposed to transform into this, and you can replace it with this, but it looks like shit. Personally, I like it when my stuff looks nice, which is why I also think that including the perfect static gun mode is great. Ugh. Overall, this is a pretty good start, and I would recommend this. If you want one, you can get this at the Show Z store. Use my code if you want to see me review the rest of these. Or even if you don't. I'm no longer asking.
Hello and hey, this is Zerogokin Reviews, and today we're looking at the SH Figuarts Chainsaw Man. In the beginning, he was Brainflaw Man. After being bitten by a radioactive chainsaw, he became Chainsaw Man. His very respectable yet simplistic first goal is to get some titty in these hands. Well, maybe not these ones. Actually, yes, these ones, but without the additional protruding elements. I made my funny intro. I want to talk about the anime a bit. It's really weird. Maybe it's just the stuff I've been seeing, but the lead up to it and the manga being very popular did give people overinflated expectations. And that hype sort of killed the show for some people. But then seeing those people in my social media feed makes me like the show more. I wasn't blown away by it or anything, but it was like, fine, you know? To be fair, I've already liked the manga for years, although I haven't finished it yet. But also, I will have to admit further bias, as I absolutely love Fire Punch. It's actually a really weird contrast. The guy who made My Dress Up Darling's previous manga was about a guy who really wants to fuck his little sister. And then you have the guy who made Chainsaw Man's previous manga, which is also about a guy who really wants to fuck his little sister. I'm joking. It's a story about a guy who's permanently on fire in a post-apocalypse that really goes places. It's a fucking ride, and I genuinely had an absolutely wonderful time reading it. It might even be my favorite manga, period. Unfortunately for me, it doesn't make very good figure material, unlike Tatsuki Fujimoto's next series, which we are and have been talking about today. This looks fucking sick. And it's not just our main guy who's nice to look at. But of course, those are discussions for another time, because here we have Chainsaw Man. Devils in this series function similarly to gods in a lot of other series, but instead of gaining power from reverence, their power comes from the fear of whatever general concept they're the devil of. For example, the cock devil is probably pretty strong, actually. But on the other hand, the vagina devil is of course, this isn't a devil, this is a devil man, which is a person with the heart of a devil. Literally, not metaphorically. The design inspiration for the devil man did not come from Devil Man, obviously, but rather, if I'm remembering correctly, the Tsutomu Nihei series Abara, which is more apparent with later developments. Abara looks fucking sick, so it follows that the Devilmen also look fucking sick. And Chainsaw Man in particular is a great design. There's not much you can't improve with chainsaws. Man is inherently better when chainsaw, and this is that. And this figure does a fantastic job of recreating that of which this is, unlike some other figures. I really get the impression that the figure was rushed out. As a Chainsaw Man figure, this one is by far the better one, but as a Denji figure, the Figma is inherently better, because this is only a Chainsaw Man. Ugh. And as just Chainsaw Man, it's very well sculpted. The details are sharp, ow, except for the noise, which is a good thing. I think their recent Spider-Man stuff is a bit misguided. If you make the noise sharp, it can distract from the things you actually want to focus on. It's also why his neck in the anime is a bit weird. The color choice here is great. The outfit is very muted, which pulls attention towards other details. The chainsaws, the blood splatters, the vibrant and striking head, and the shoes, which are sculpted in a way that's very appealing to me. I like how chunky they are. That being said, I don't think he needs them. Chainsaws are an undeniably cool method of locomotion. Speaking of locomotion, or motion, I don't know. Articulation is really good. Despite the 3 big, thin extremities, I don't get the impression these will break. They are a flexible yet rigid material. It's good. The arm articulation is designed in a way that maintains the shape of the shoulder, but doesn't look as bad as if it were to be done in what I assume is the conventional way. Start the thing you're gonna skip. Accessories are fairly minimal. I would have liked to have had the chainsaw leg, or was Denji in addition to Chainsaw Menji. But considering the scope of this, I don't have a problem with how it only comes with the following. The mouth plates come out when you just kind of move the head around. Not that I have an issue with it, aside from how I wish the mouth was just articulated, but I imagine if you were to actually give thought to it, it wouldn't be feasible to implement, so this is fine. As consolation, the tongue has a bit of rotation. Conversely, hands do not have any articulation because I don't know how they would. You might not have noticed this, but there's a chainsaw going through them. An unconventional design calls for an unconventional system, which works absolutely fine. Lastly, and possibly leastly, you get the action time. I guess it's nice. I'm glad it comes with it. I don't know. Got some Mazinger Ludens. Overall, whilst minimal, it's cleverly designed, well articulated, and looks great. If you agree with that and don't mind the price, I can recommend it. Otherwise, no.
Future Gokin here, and it's time for Scuffed Gokin Impressions. Because this video was 100% made in America. Anyway, today we're looking at Stormcloud's Baki's dad. The joke here is that if I reviewed Baki, I'd call him Son of Ogre. The joke here is that I'm not gonna review Baki. So what is Baki?
What the hell are you?
The series. It's a shonen battle manga similar to JoJo's in that battles are also puzzles that are solved with stupid, insane shit. But what makes it really psychotic is that there are no imaginary friends or supernatural elements. Everything is grounded in some kind of physical reality or psychological phenomena, which also makes things really fucking funny. I recommend it, even if it's a series you wouldn't expect would get figures, for reasons. There are a few statues by Bandai. I remember really wanting to get this one, which is a good thing I didn't because you need just look to know Storm Collectibles knocked this out of the park. This is our first male cast-off figure, and I couldn't ask for a sexier man. Okay, he's no Souther. Baki has a fucking disgusting art style that I rather like. There's nothing quite like it out there. If you're wondering why I won't get Baki, it's because unlike the art style, I don't like him. He's a bit of a shit. His dad, on the other hand, is an even bigger shit, and that's great. There's something animalistic and monstrous about his design that I find immensely appealing and appalling, but in the right way. Also, this laugh scene. Despite what it looks like, he's not going psycho here. Someone told him his son beat up a 100-kilogram praying mantis, specifically an imaginary one. So this reaction is the correct reaction. I will say, this does drop the ball in the sense that it doesn't look anywhere near as disgusting as in the manga, because you don't see all the horrible lines, punctuating the detail, which in a way is a good thing. But the actual sculpted detail is on point and is lovely. You can see every horrible little detail on his disgusting body, just not as clearly as in the manga. Something I just love so goddamn much, but it also frightens me, is this chest. It's like the manliest sausage I've ever seen. Because his entire chest is this thick, flexible piece that works so fucking well, I pray to every demonic presence out there that doesn't break over time. Since this is the perfect solution for neck articulation. Which, now that I've said it, articulation is great. Anyway.
Accessories are fucking wonderful. You get so much great stuff that is excessive in a limited fashion. 3 additional heads that all look fantastic, and a shit ton of hands that are very dynamic. Most are even flexible, so you can get even more out of them. You also get his clothes, which are a pain in the ass. I do appreciate the option. Since what's nice about cloth clothes is that I can't see the joints. What sucks about cloth clothes is that I can't see the joints. Besides, I like him better without clothes. Size comparisons. I don't have any figures here. Beans. Overall, I kinda love this. So while this is out of stock, I would recommend newer Storm Collectibles figures, assuming they're of this quality, which you can get at the place I got this, Gundammit. If you use Gundammit or Shozy Store, remember to use my code. You did it before? Do it again. Hello and welcome to Zerogokin Reviews. Today we'll be looking at the Neo Art Leonidas, which is a 4th party figure of the Perfect Effect Leonidas, which is a 3rd party figure of Lio Convoy from Beast Wars 2nd, the Japan-only 2nd season of Beast Wars. It's possible you either haven't heard of Beast Wars 2nd or know little of it. The reason being nobody's seen it. And in that vein, I, of course, watched all of it. As a 2nd season to Beast Wars, it's quite bad, but on its own merits, it's still kinda ass. The story is ostensibly unrelated to Beast Wars, only sharing vaguely similar elements. The Cybertrons, which is the Japanese name for the Autobots, and I think also Maximals because they couldn't be fucked, are pursued by Galvatron, who in the search for the worst kind of energy, French Angloid energy, lands on the planet Gaia, where he spends half of his time asleep for being quote-unquote too strong, and the other half getting his pink ass kicked, truly living up to Galvatron's legacy of being useless and embarrassing. The only thing that follows well from Beast Wars is the designs. Here, they also look fucking disgusting, except Lio Convoy, who, as a result of arbitrarily making him Schrodinger's furry, looks pretty great. Hello and welcome to Zerogokin Reviews. Snail Shell is back with their latest figure, Victoria, who has a secret. Although, not really. You could say they're completely upfront with this release. Although, still not really, because this actually comes with 2 separate figures, Front Armor Girl Victoria and No Armor Girl Victoria. You can also mix and match them to get Top Armor Girl Victoria and Bottom Armor Girl Victoria. Of course, as you must be aware by this point, in addition to being a hack, I have completely sold out, as I got this for free from Hobbylink Japan. More on that later. So why does this look like this? What, is she stupid? Maybe. Perhaps this was designed with survivorship bias based on like one person back when people only had muskets. No. Well, maybe actually. But no. This was designed by Ota Yojo, whose original design work and art style I don't really like. They're not by any means a bad artist, but their stuff is certainly not for me, which is why I originally wasn't too interested in this. Even when the promotional images dropped, there did not exist shits for me to give. Then it came out, and so did shit, because I started seeing a lot of really great in-hand photos, which convinced me to try and get one. I now understand why the Snail Shell Twitter account spam retweets these. They want me to shit. There is still some weirdness with the eyes, because they're articulated, which I'll get into too much detail about later, and unfortunately the new backdrop looks kinda like a horror movie, so this might look creepier than it actually is. That being said, while I don't like the original artwork, and I don't like the veil so you won't be seeing much of that, as a figure this design is great. It's like Saber but without the baggage. Or I guess the most similar thing I can think of is Batch, the Black Knight from 5-Star Stories. He's even got the round shield and bitchin' heels. The armor design is definitely more akin to something on a robot than any more conventional kind of worn armor, which is explained by how Ota Yojo designed a lot of Mecha Musume. The shapes of the plates are bulky and decently complex, which does contrast really well with the nigh completely open back. It's a bit funny that in the last review, I spent a lot of time criticizing the practicality of the armor design, and here I'm praising the least practical shit imaginable. Yet somehow the chest plate is better designed. I don't care much about No Armor Girl. The most interesting thing about it is that even without any armor, she's managed to find something to skimp out on, which I at least appreciate her consistency. Watch my other videos to hear me talk about this more, but as always, Snail Shell seems allergic to lower body garments that aren't high cut, despite how you can't cut the articulation in a way that will maintain the continuity of the ass. Speaking of which,
Articulation is quite good as usual. Just keep in mind that because the parts are made to be interchangeable with each other, including other snail shell figures, there can be some that are too loose. This isn't that common, but like everything in life, you are at the mercy of RNGesus. Pray for your soul. Articulation range, however, isn't too different from contemporary Figmas, as the range on those is somewhat recently updated, except for this really extensive kick, which unfortunately not only breaks the sculpt like crazy, but also makes me die a little on the inside. It reminds me of that demonstration I did of how you shouldn't design legs. Fortunately, it can do more reasonable poses without breaking the sculpt. You'd think the armor would cover this, but the armored version actually can't do this at all, due to some design differences. I will say though, while the armored version is basically the same, the body of the non-armored version is more articulated than Milk Tea Girl, which is appreciated. A usual staple of snail shell figures is the articulated eyes, which are a neat option. However, as a reviewer, I've grown a lot more mixed on these. Most of the time spent recording the last snail shell review I did was me losing my fucking mind about getting the eye placement to not look like ass. For more general collectors, a problem you might have with these is that, like any kind of plastic articulation, you need to have separate parts that can get in the way of the continuity of the ass. No, not the ass. You need to have separate parts that can get in the way of the continuity of the figure, which in theory shouldn't be a problem at all, since your eyeballs aren't supposed to look like they're fused with your skin. If yours do, I recommend seeing someone about that. But the problem is that anime figures are not entirely 3D. The eye area is usually made relatively flat, so the eyes can just be printed on as a 2D element. But here, the eyes have definition strictly for the articulation, and are otherwise not designed any differently. These are details you can add, so why not? Well, the most obvious answer is that it's just easier. But here's a related question. Have you ever noticed that hot toy figures don't have eyelashes? Well, they do, but they're not realistic. Despite that, they can look pretty lifelike. The reason this works is because, on real people, the eyelashes are a fairly small detail, but for anime characters, depending on the art style, eyelashes can be an extremely prominent detail. So what do? Would fully sculpting them at this scale even work? Considering how thin it would be, probably not. Something you can do is to just sculpt them at partial depth. But if you're compromising by making it less 3D, and similarly weird, why not just make it a 2D element to begin with? And here lies what I think is the reasoning. Although I don't actually know what I'm talking about, I just would like to see some variation in this area, especially for 1/4 scale figures. It's always bothered me a bit that the face sculpts on those tend to be as defined as much smaller figures. Anyway. It's kind of a shame that this is the last major segment of the review, because unless you consider the entire second figure one, accessories are not this figure's strong point. Faces are pretty good, except this one, which is probably a defect. Where did the teeth go? Even the shape is all fucked up. Fucked up to a much lesser degree for a different reason, the hands come in 5 pairs, which because only one of her hands is armored, it's actually 3 pairs for each figure. But because both figures are the same character, in practice it's actually just 3. They're otherwise fine, but it is a bit of a bummer. Unlike her musket, which I mean, if this armor's gonna work anywhere, it's probably in a firing line. The design for it is very good. Like all great sci-fi guns, it's a long square, also known as a rectangle. It's basically a sleeker las gun. You can detach the bayonet and the magazine, which thankfully don't come off too easily. The shield, on the other hand, is annoyingly attached with a magnet. I get why they did it, but it kinda fucking sucks. Unfortunately, it'd probably be terrible, but I kinda wish you could do that with stands. So you can keep the figure up, but also not have a hole in the back. Because fuck claw stands. Alright. You now get clear stands instead of those old bricks you'd get, which were cool and came with storage, but they took up too much space for figures that aren't all that big. Guts, Mazinger, Ludens. Overall, neat concept. I do have some complaint, but I can get behind this. The price isn't the best, but it's more reasonable considering this comes with 2 figures. So I can recommend this if you can get behind it and don't mind the price. Fuck.
在庫商品を 5% オフするにはコード055を使用してください。
They didn't ask me to do this, but they also have the most recent snail shell pre-order for a really good price.
That's about it. Thank you to the patrons. Showing thine ass in battle is pretty fucking stupid, like this patron. Thank you to Hobbylink Japan for the figure. They've been pretty great to work with. Of course, thank you to Photon Lab Reviews for their recording contributions, and I'll see y'all next time.
Ass we can.